Hello, can you hear me? No. Oh, everybody's on mute except for me. I'll go on to mute. Thanks, bye.
Hi, Belinda.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. We're just
You-
having. Can you hear me all right?
I can now, yeah.
Yeah, we're just having a couple of technical hitches, but we're getting there.
Okay. Anything I need to do or just shut up and leave you to it?
No, I think. No, not at the moment. I think we're almost there now.
Okay. All right then. I'll just go on to mute and
Okay.
I went on to mute before I'd finished saying I'm going on to mute. And I'm going to stop my video. Just shout if you need me.
Okay. Everybody, sorry for the slight delay in letting you in. We will be getting started soon. Just to let you know, we are live on YouTube now.
Thank you.
Zahid, are you there?
Morning, Chris. Yes, I am.
Oh, hi there. I have to leave at 12. I've got another meeting, I'm afraid.
Okay, we will try and get through as much as we can by then, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Who was that?
That's Pete tapping. Morning,
Yes,
Sally.
can see you and hear you, Pete, yes.
Grant, thank you.
Are we ready, Dem Services?
Yes, Chair, I can do the roll call whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good morning, members. Good morning to everybody listening in. Welcome to the Peak District National Park Authority Public Programmes and Resources Committee on Friday the 30th of April. Can I welcome everyone and to our, hopefully our last virtual P&R committee, if all goes well. Okay, can I just remind members that we've got a fairly large agenda, as you know. We will try and finish by 1 o'clock if we can, to give Democratic Services a chance to organise for planning committee, which is this afternoon as well. Okay, so shall we, as we're about to take the roll call, can I just remind members that for them to be mindful that for both Stanage North Lees item and car parks, that they are our properties. They are the properties of the National Park Authority. Okay, Democratic Services, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll call out each member's name. If you can confirm you're here, please.
Belinda, before you start, I think we've got our chairman, Andrew McCloy, waiting to be let in. If you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
I'll just wait a moment to see that he's in. There you go. That's fine. Okay. Councillor Atkin. Councillor Atkin. No. Mr. Beresford.
Present.
Councillor Farrell.
Yes, present.
Councillor Furness.
Here.
Professor Haddock-Fraser.
Present.
Councillor Heath.
Present.
Councillor McCloy.
Yep, present.
Councillor McLaren.
Present.
Councillor Priestley.
Present.
Councillor Tapping.
Present.
Councillor Walker.
Present.
Councillor Waller.
Present.
Ms. Witter.
There are apologies from Yvonne Witter.
Thank you. Councillor Woods.
Present.
Mr. Hamid.
Present, and I have to declare an interest that for item 5, I am the authority nominated member on the Stanage Forum, and I'm also involved with the Stanage North Lees Heritage Action Group. Can they be noted, please?
Thank you, Chair. Those are noted. That completes the roll call.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is minutes of the meeting of the 5th of March. I believe they've been circulated and agreed for accuracy. Can I have a mover for those minutes, please? And a seconder. Yes, thank you, James. Are those minutes approved as the correct record? If everybody shows their hands, or yeah, is that okay? I can assume, yes, they are. Thank you very much. Is there any urgent business?
Sorry, no, Chair. No urgent business.
Okay, public participation.
We have 2 public participation, one for item 5 and one for item 6 when you get to it, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, members, we should move on to the 2 items for a decision at the beginning of our meeting. The first is the North Lees Estate Built Assets Proposal. I'm going to invite Emma Stone as the author to present this paper. It is a big paper, 7 appendices. It's quite an important asset and one of our jewels as an authority. There are some key issues. There are 5 recommendations. There is 1 public participant, and then we will have a discussion. So over to you, Emma.
Thank you. Good morning. As you can probably tell from the 7 appendices and the length of the report, the proposal is a result of a significant amount of work that's gone in by my team and others over the last around 18 months to develop a plan for the built assets that form part of the North Lees estate. So this has been given some priority because we have vacant properties that required some sort of decision on their future. In order to progress the work and ensure that we were not missing any possible options and opportunities, we did bring in some consultants early on. I think that was around 2019, and that was Fisher German. They were employed to appraise the estate and provide options for us to consider further. So having received their report, we did an initial evaluation of those options based on financial viability and the fit with the authority's role. And the remaining possibilities after that initial filter were taken forward to a consultation. Due to the significant level of interest in North Lees estate, the consultation was quite extensive, and we sought to reach as wide an audience as possible, and there were different levels to that consultation. So there was an online public consultation which was fairly high level, and anyone could participate in that. We promoted that through our social media channels at the time. And then there were a series of more in-depth workshops which were facilitated by our policy and communities team, and those engaged with the Standish Forum steering group, specialist staff at the authority, particularly our cultural heritage and development control policy teams, and their members too. And then there was a further workshop with Friends of the Peak District, CPRE, and the British Mountaineering Council, which they'd requested. So those workshops went into more detail on the options that we'd thought were financially viable at that stage. Alternative suggestions were also invited throughout that process. So if there was anything that people felt we'd missed, you know, golden opportunity for what we should be doing with those assets, there was an opportunity for people to put those forwards. So the outcome of that consultation then has guided the development of this proposal.
Is that yours, Chris?
Oh, I didn't organise that sound effect. The last sentence I said was the outcome of the consultation has guided the development of this proposal that you have got in front of you. So the proposal forms one element of the estate management plan. The management plan is a holistic plan for the whole estate, and a draft of that's been included as an appendix to the report. Mark Anderson, who is the North Lees Estate Ranger, has worked with the Standish Forum steering group over the last year to update and develop that plan and set some more smart targets around it. Mark's here today in case there are any questions specifically about the management plan element. So the proposal's got well, 4 key aims. It's seeking to maximise public benefits of the estate by increasing the opportunities to engage with cultural heritage. That opportunity is not really available now while the properties are rented as private residences. The second aim is to achieve a significant reduction in carbon emissions by utilising renewable technology as far as we can in those heritage properties and on the campsite. The third aim is to ensure that this sort of significant cultural heritage asset of North Lees Hall and the Crook barn and the estate itself are cared for to a higher standard that fulfills our responsibilities to look after it as custodians for future generations. And the fourth aim is creating a financially sustainable model for the estate, which covers all the foreseeable maintenance and repairs for the future, as well as funding implementation of the management plan and the more aspirational aims around that. So it's sustainable revenue that we focused on here, rather than a one-off capital income that we could have achieved by perhaps disposing of elements of it. So we're also working with what's not in the report is that we're also working with the Peak District National Park Foundation to raise further funds which would help to support those management plan aspirations, and there's several projects and funding bids underway to help with that. The foundation's leading on those. So there are elements of the proposal that will be new ground for the authority, such as holiday letting, but we have got experienced visitor welcome staff at the existing incredibly popular campsite, and the phased approach that I've proposed should give us the time that we need to get experience in that slightly different proposition. A separate piece of work is underway to look at the structure of the asset management service as a whole, and depending on the outcome of this meeting, that will involve some tweaks to the campsite staffing structure, will help us to fulfil this proposal more effectively and have that assurance that we have got the right staff in place to be able to manage it. So the proposal is based on budget costs at this stage. It'll be subject to all the necessary permissions and further consultation with specialist staff. For example, we will need listed building consent for some of the work that's proposed. We will need a archaeological survey before installing the ground source heat pump, and all of that is anticipated to take place if the proposal is approved. Our senior building surveyor, Laura Armstrong, who's also here as well, in case you had any questions on that technical aspect, she's provided the initial costings. Laura's got extensive experience of refurbishing the authority's heritage assets, particularly on the Warzone Moors estate. Our corporate property team manager, Matt Freestone, who's also here. I've got my whole team here. Matt is the lead on the authority's carbon management plan. And Matt's done some work on evaluating the potential and made the recommendations for utilising renewable energy technologies that are included in the report. So if you had any questions about that, Matt is probably a good person to answer those. So we're requesting committee approval for expenditure on this proposal to enable investment in reducing carbon emissions, conserving a significant cultural heritage asset, and implementing a new model that will lead to financial sustainability and maximised public benefits. That's all I've got to say on it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. That's a concise summary of a very important and very dense document. There is a lot here, and I know members will want to comment and ask questions. I think we have one public participant for this item, and I think Andrea, if we can ask STEM services, right. Sorry, I can't hear that.
The Spanish Forum welcome this commitment to investment in the context of a busy, iconic and complex estate and public sector finance pressures. We want to see its historic assets used and cared for. The proposal reflects elements of the options appraisal that
Sorry, members, as we missed the beginning of the video, we're going to rerun it from the start.
Yep.
we favoured. The association with the revised management plan, as that sets out our ambitions for the whole estate, including the new wild stannage programme, for which we will need external joined up investment plan.
Apologies, it's one of those mornings where we seem to be having a few technical problems. We will try to let you hear the speaker from the start. Sorry about that.
Yeah, apologies, members. I have got his written statement, so I'll read it out instead because we're having a few technical issues with the video. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Karen, please.
Right, thank you. So this is a statement from Mr. Neil Porter regarding item 5. The Stannage Forum welcome this commitment to investment in the context of a busy, iconic and complex estate and public sector finance pressures. We want to see its historic assets used and cared for. The proposal reflects elements of the options appraisal that we favoured. The phased approach is sensible. We like the association with the revised management plan, as that sets out our ambitions for the whole estate, including the new wild Stannage programme for which we will need external funding. However, the focus on built assets weakens our call for a joined-up investment plan to meet those wider ambitions for the estate. Holiday lettings business constitutes the core proposal, a new venture in which the authority has little experience using historic properties in a remote location. We welcome the phased approach and urge you to set clear breakpoints, performance measures and thresholds for success or failure. You must be ready to change course if needed for the safety or viability of the estate and have a robust plan B. We would welcome a clearer statement on the risks and costs, how to ensure quality management to attract higher paying guests, checks on the condition people leave these assets in, protection, safety and security of the archaeological assets and the farm. Maintenance issues and care of the properties whilst vacant should be considered. The camping pods have been very successful, a credit to the campsite team and the vision of the authority. We support further investment in these facilities. Our consensus view was to consider retaining the farmhouse as a residential let in the medium term to allow for a manager or representative of the farm tenant to be present on site. Antisocial behaviour patterns currently prevalent indicate that this may prove vital to ensure safety and security of the farm, its stock, the heritage assets and the surrounding habitat. Our heritage group objects to any work for the proposed ground source heat pump. Even with archaeological survey, any work should avoid the former garden site to protect it for future generations. We urge that money is spent first on draft proofing and insulation and to consider whether heat pump expenditure might be better spent on other options to reduce emissions or carbon capture. Finally, can you present options for work on the Crook and threshing barns, including roof maintenance work during 2021, so we can be ready with a plan by the end of this management period? In evaluating the proposal, we urge you to think beyond just the assets and the commercial benefit and look at the value of the assets to the estate as a whole, its users, residents and biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. And most members of this committee should have also received that statement in written form via an email from the Secretary of the Stannage Forum last night, I think. If you haven't, let us know. But that full statement was sent to us as well. Okay, we have quite a bit to discuss. I know, Andrew, you wanted to kick us off first. So if you can let me know and let Dem Services know. I'm going to struggle to see everybody, but Andrew, would you like to start?
Chair, thank you very much. I've got a couple of comments, then I'll go on to some specific questions to officers. And I make no apologies that this is a bit lengthy because this is an important item, as you say, Chair. It is our flagship estate. It is iconic in terms of the Peak District being known to especially to the wider population, but also what Stannage North Lees delivers in terms of not just the built environment, but the natural environment, how it delivers on our purposes first and second purpose as well, the education and enjoyment of the national park. But first of all, may I say a public thank you to the Stannage Forum, to Neil Porter. Although we couldn't hear what he said, Chair, it was his words were read out very clearly, and we've all read the supporting statement. And once more, I'd like to thank the Stannage Forum because they're proving again that the sensible, informed and constructive advice is really, really useful in terms of our decision making going forward. So thank you from us. Thank you to officers as well, because I know there's been a lot of hard work behind the scenes from Emma and her team. What she said earlier is just scratching the surface. This is the result of considerable investigation, consultation and work. So we're very grateful and we respect your professional advice. However, I've got some questions here, and they are specifically on three properties, and starting with Cateside Cottage. Now, Emma, I primed you in advance because I wanted you to understand my thinking here. Of all the proposals here, I have some reservations in what's being suggested for Cateside Cottage, and my question is this: why isn't an option put forward to us for possible disposal? I say that because this is a non-listed heritage asset. It's in a dilapidated form. It will cost a lot of money to bring back up to serviceable use. And we are stretched with resources and expertise, and I just wondered whether we should be focusing our efforts on the two key heritage assets we have here, the Crook Barn and North Lees Hall, and that Cateside Cottage might be more of a diversion. I'm interested to know what the consultants thought of that and why this option isn't being presented to us. Chair, I'll ask my questions for the other two properties, and then Emma can come back if you like on all three, because the other two are less detailed. The Crook Barn, I'm with the Standish Forum on this. I really do think we need to think as soon as we can about an option for this incredibly important property. I do understand the difficulty in finding a solution here. I've visited the Crook Barn before. It's wonderful, but it's problematic in terms of what it is, its location. But I would, if we can manage it for Millersdale Goodshed in terms of a lottery grant and the fantastic work that's going on there, then I'm sure we can find a solution for the Crook Barn, and I'm sure we can do it maybe sooner rather than later. And then finally on North Lees Hall, my plea there, Emma, would be whatever solution we come up with, whether it's letting or holiday accommodation, can we ensure that we maximise the opportunity for the public to visit this fantastic heritage asset? It is quite possibly the most important heritage asset that we own, and the opportunity for people to come and enjoy, to learn, directly serves our second purpose, and we must maximise that opportunity. But all in all, I appreciate the efforts that's gone in, and I would just say, in our deliberations here, let's just focus on what these properties deliver for Standish North Lees, our vision, but also what they deliver for our purposes, first and second purpose here. We need all our component parts to deliver, and that's a wider comment, I think, as authority chairman, on all the property that we own and manage. If we own and manage property that we judge is not significantly contributing and furthering our purposes, we must question why we own and manage it in the first place. We are stretched for resources. We know we've got to make further savings ahead, and we've got to be really precise in how we operate and what we invest in. But notwithstanding that, there are some good proposals here and a lot of hard work. So Emma, thank you to you and your team. Thank you, Chair.
Just before I ask you to come back, Emma, Chris Furness, you've got your hands up. Do your questions complement that, Chris?
Well, I've got questions and suggestions, but I also want to move the recommendation. So I don't know. I'm happy to leave it to later if you like.
Okay, Chris, can I come back to you then?
Yeah, okay.
Emma.
Thank you for that. I can't deal with too many questions all in one go. I think I've got note of Andrew, so I'll try to answer as best I can. So, Cateside Cottage, in the options that we consulted on last year, we did include disposal as one of those options. It wasn't suggested by the consultants because at that stage, when we appointed the consultants, we provided them with all of the background information that we had at the time, and we'd got a strong input from the Standish Forum Steering Group that they did not want to see the estate split up into component parts or elements of it disposed of kind of piecemeal. So that information was given to the consultants along with a lot of other background data that we wanted them to consider. So they did not propose disposing of Cateside Cottage. We did include it as one of the options that we consulted on. So I haven't got the consultation report in front of me, but it got a sort of mixed response really during the consultation. So there was no clear we should dispose of it, we shouldn't dispose of it. So when I moved on to the more detailed financial appraisal element of the work, by looking at the income that we could generate from Caticide versus the cost of borrowing to do that refurbishment work, which is extensive, it generates a significant surplus, which helps to make the rest of this proposal sustainable. So it's supporting things that don't generate any income, like the Crook barn and the work that we want to do there, contributing to the overall financial picture of the estate. So it would generate a surplus of something like £8,000 to £9,000 a year when you've taken off the cost of borrowing to do that work. So yes, it is a draw on our resources to do that refurbishment in the first place. But it is the type of refurbishment that Matt's team and Laura in particular are doing on a fairly routine basis on the Walsall Moors estate. And I think Laura's already started to work on drawing up the specification for Caticide Cottage as part of her initial survey work and developing these budget costings. So we do feel that that's achievable with the resources that we've got available. It's also, I suppose the focus is on achieving sustainable revenue income for the estate so that we can support it long term. So that's the other bit. If we did dispose of Caticide Cottage now, yes, we'd get this substantial chunk of capital which we could spend on something else, or we could use it to offset the other work that's recommended in my report. But actually it's sustainable revenue income that we are short of. That's sort of the pinch point for the authority, and that's what was identified as a target in the pillars that were articulated in the authority's commercial strategy. So that's where I've put my focus. It's that long-term plan to deal with all the foreseeable maintenance so that we don't have situations where you know, costs are coming out of the blue and suddenly we've got to find a chunk of money. It's all planned in, it's all anticipated, and we've got a cushion there for anything that isn't foreseen. So I've focused on revenue income rather than capital. Caticide Cottage generates a significant chunk of revenue income that would support the estate long term. So on the Crook barn, yes, absolutely, we do need some sort of answer to that. No one has one at the moment. That's the honest answer. The consultation didn't really give us a clear way forward with it. I didn't want to hold up the rest of this proposal whilst we tried to find a solution for the Crook barn. I think I'm convinced that it does need a significant chunk of external funding to be able to do anything there. None of the commercial options that were put forward by the consultants seem to be viable to me or in keeping with what we should be doing as an authority, really. So there will be a separate project on that. The only suggestion that kept coming out from the consultation process and since then was to use it as some sort of educational centre, but that's it. So as far as knowing what the market is for that, how realistic that might be, we don't have that data yet. So we need to build that business case and then look for suitable funding opportunities if that's the way we do want to go with it. So I see that as a piece of work in its own right. Yes, it needs some priority putting to it. Having it empty, very few people getting the experience to go in there and even appreciate the building isn't ideal. So yeah, there's always the intention there to move on that piece of work now and really want to involve the Standage Forum Steering Group and the Heritage Action Group in that work too, and listen to their ideas for that. We just need a little bit more time to do it. So North Lees Hall, yes, maximising the opportunities for the public to visit. That was right at the outset my aim. Me personally, I've grown up in Chesterfield and lived there most of my life, or that area. I visited the Peak District regularly with my family. Definitely Stanage. Never knew North Lees Hall existed until I came to work for the authority. And I was absolutely shocked when I saw, and that's not to exaggerate, shocked when I saw that we own that fantastic building and hardly anyone knows about it. So yeah, absolutely want to maximise the opportunity for the public to visit. So by letting its holiday accommodation, it's bringing in some income to help us look after it long term, but it's also given us the flexibility to reserve time out of the calendar, out of that booking calendar, to do whatever engagement activities we think are the best. So Heritage Open Days have happened there for the last few years and they've been incredibly popular. So we'd continue to do that, but there might be more that we can do. I remember Adrian was particularly interested in writing workshops there because of the literary connections, and that's another option we can look at. We've got some contacts for that too. So yeah, that was at the heart of it really, was a way of, it's not suitable to just open up. It's not a stately home that you could have visitors in and out of every day. but there's a better balance, I think, that we can achieve between public access and enjoyment of it, and it generating some income and being protected. I hope that's covered everything, Andrew.
Chair, thank you. That was a really clear, helpful set of answers. So, Emma, thank you very much. You've allayed some of my concerns. Can I also just say as well, I found the YouTube clips taking the view around the 3 properties really, really good. I've never been to Catterside Cottage and probably won't. So that was a really, really informative visual aid. So thank you. Great idea.
Thank you very much. Would any other members, before I invite Chris, Janet and Dick Fraser, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I've read the papers in detail, Emma and team, and thank you very much. I just want to comment that I'm really delighted to see the prominence of the carbon reduction initiatives here, mindful, of course, of the heritage side of things and the potential that particularly the ground source heat work needs to think about the archaeology and the gardens. But I'm delighted to see that being taken forward. So that's just a comment.
Thank you. Charlotte Farrell.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I thought it was a really good paper. I really support the things that are in it. I walk round Stanage at least once a week, but I've never been in North Lees Hall, and I think the idea, I mean, of opening it sort of and Catterside in a way similar to the Landmark Trust properties, giving other people the chance to stay. I mean, maybe Catterside isn't such an iconic building, but it's in a beautiful landscape. So I think it would be really good. And like Janet, I really think the idea of renewable energy is good. I don't think we should worry about the garden so much, because after all, if we don't go down this route, 37% of carbon in this country is emitted by heating, and it's a way to show other people too how good it is. And I think once people are in a property with heat pumps, etc., they'll realise it's a much better way forward because it's much nicer heat. So I think we should definitely embrace that as well, because what's a heritage garden if we've actually not got much of a planet left? So thanks.
Emma, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, please. On the garden, that is as far as I'm aware, a suspected location of a garden that's talked about. I don't think there's any actual evidence that there is a garden there, so we would be carrying out this archaeological survey before doing any excavation. And of course, we're not going to dig up the garden. We'll find an alternative location if we're going to cause any damage to archaeology. So I just remembered that Neil in his presentation said something about draft proofing and insulation of the building rather than installing a ground source heat pump. I'm not sure whether Matt might want to say something about that. Did you, Matt?
Yeah, I can excuse me, say a couple of words. I mean, the draft proofing and insulation is in there. If you have a look at one of the appendices where we've used our environmental indicator methodology, you'll see that the draft proofing particularly is listed as one of the measures we will be looking at. But that won't, make the sort of improvements we need to make alone if we're going to be bringing the property in line with our carbon management plan. And of course, as Emma says, we'll consider the archaeology. We'll have a survey done, and we'll make it work, because that's what we do on all our properties. Bearing in mind that the heritage aspects of them. But making the renewables work alongside that. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Okay, I think the floor is yours, Chris. Finesse.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right? I'm sorry for the funny noises that went on. My original laptop wasn't stopped working. Everything froze up, so I had to switch to another one, which meant that I was on twice at one time, which I think was responsible for the funny noises. Anyway, I've been a member of this authority on and off over the last 18 years, and I think this is probably the best report I've seen in that time. I agree with the plans and the way they're to be carried out. I like the way possible setbacks are dealt with, and I'm happy with the budgets. It all seems feasible, and congratulations to Emma and officers who have been involved with this. And I'm happy to move all 5 recommendations. There are just a few suggestions and questions which I have. I'll give the suggestions first because they don't need answers. The need for a geophysical survey of the whole garden is referred to somewhere, but I can't find the page at the moment. In fact, the Vivat Trust did a survey of the structures, and the structure which appeared on that could be the foundations of the original hall. I have a particular interest in that because my ancestors on my mother's side, her maiden name was Eyre, lived there in the 14th century. I would like to see some excavation done there. It could be very rewarding. So the point that was made by has been made before, that that garden shouldn't really be disturbed until the archaeology is decided, I think is correct. My other suggestion is about the insects. The diverse insect populations are referred to on page 51, but it says they are largely unrecorded. I suggest this could become one of the university research projects referred to on page 66. I've got 4 questions now, Emma. Shall I do them one at a time, or do you want all together?
I'll write them down as you say them, thanks.
Okay. Question 1 is, where would the tenant farmer live if we decide to give him notice to convert the house into a holiday let? Would he be likely to give up the farm? That's the first one. Second one, on the graphs on page 22 confused me a little bit because you changed the colours on strategy 1s and 2s, red and blue. Was there a purpose in that, or was it just a mistake or something? The next question is about Bell's box, which is referred to on page 60. It says only 2 groups of scouts used this in 2014-15. But they aim to increase the usage by 2016. So the question is, did they? And what is the current situation with Bell's box? My last one is, who is likely to be responsible for identifying a sustainable use for the Crook barn? On page 72, it says this needs to be done by February 2023, but no one is delegated to deliver that. So any ideas who's going to be asked to do that? That's it, Emma.
Thank you very much, Chris. Emma, do you want to respond to those? I know Pete Tapping wants to come in as well.
Yeah, okay. Some of those questions where you referred to page numbers, are they to do with the management plan? Are they the page numbers on the management plan?
They're the page numbers that we've got in the old reference sent to us.
Oh, okay. Bell's box. I'm not sure where that's referred to in my report. Is that in the?
It's on page 16 in the report that we've got.
Right, okay. Yours is all printed out as one document. I think that might be about the management plan, and so I'll refer that to Mark in a moment. The tenant farmer. So at the moment, we've got the tenant farmer's son who has taken up a short-term residential tenancy in part of the hall. It's not linked to the farm business tenancy in any way. So the farm business tenancy was let without accommodation. That was on the advice of our rural surveying team, who their opinion was that because it's quite a relatively small holding, that it wouldn't sustain somebody as their main income, and that it was an add-on to a farm with better facilities elsewhere, and that was the best option for letting that farm tenancy. So that is what we did, and that's what we got. So we the farm tenant also manages some of the Eastern Moors partnership land, as well as his own farm. He's got better livestock handling facilities at his own farm in Holmesfield. So although he does use the farm buildings at Northlees as well. So the two things aren't really linked. It's just coincidence that the tenant's son lived there, and it's worked out to be actually very convenient for the farm tenant to have his son on site. So particularly when they've got things like lambing going on, and they've also both been absolutely excellent in engaging with visitors about barbecues, out of hours, behaviour, that kind of thing. Really fantastic farm tenants, and we're really happy to have them. But You know, having a residential tenancy on part of the hall, it doesn't obviously make that person an employee. So I think one of the Standage Forum steering group's points was, you know, it's good to have that presence, keeping an eye on things. We can't insist on that just because somebody's a resident part of the hall. So the two things aren't linked. No, I don't think we're going to lose the farm tenant if we don't allow his son to continue as residential tenancy of the hall. And actually, with the phasing of the plan, I think there's at least another year and a half or thereabouts before we would be asking for the hall back if everything goes to plan. Graphs. I'm sorry, I haven't got the same page references as you, so I'm assuming that's the three comparisons, is it, of the three strategies that you were asking
Yes,
about?
that's right. Yeah, strategy 1 is in red on the first graph. So I looked out to the second graph and looked at the red line and thought, oh, he's second in there, but in actual fact, you changed the colours. So strategy blue, which was red in the first one, becomes blue in the second one.
Right. Sorry about that. Let me just look at my. Yeah. Sorry about that. No, it's probably just an error on my part.
Good.
Apologies. Bell's box. Right. I'm not sure about that reference in the management plan, so I'm hoping that Mark Anderson will be able to answer your question about that. Is that okay, Mark?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, that bit of text, I guess, was written in the previous management plan and not all of it's been updated, but I've been in contact with the Scouts Authority and they still want to use and utilise the box in an increased fashion. The guy I need to speak to, I've not quite managed to touch base with yet, so it is a work in progress, but anecdotally, I would say that Bell's box is still very much underutilised by the Scouts, but they do still want to utilise it more. So that is an ongoing thing for them. So hopefully that answers that question.
But it just belongs to them, doesn't it, Matt? The box belongs to the Scouts. Is that right? Bell's box.
Well, I'm still trying to uncover exactly what goes on with Bell box. My understanding was they paid the authority of peppercorn ground rent, I think, maybe £1 a year or something. But maybe they might own the physical structure, but they just rent the footprint of it from the authority. But I'm not sure about that. It's something I have to check out. If anyone else knows about that.
We'll leave you to investigate that, Mark. Thanks, Chris.
Just the last one about Crook's Barn.
Yeah. So that'll be myself and my team really will be looking into that, and we'll be working, but we need to draw in expertise from the cultural heritage team on that as well, and development control. I think because we've had these representations of some sort of educational facility, we need to speak to Sarah Wilkes, who's probably got a good idea of what the likely level of demand might be. So I guess I would say, who's responsible for that? It's probably me, but obviously with a lot of input from other people in the team. So that's it.
That's great. Okay, thanks, Emma.
Pete Tapping.
Thank you, Zahid. Yeah, I've read all through the report. It's brilliant, Emma. Thank you. Just to support something you said earlier on, I was at the BMC meeting last night where it was introduced. Louise presented the proposals, and she had to explain to the meeting where North Lees Hall and Getterside were. Most of the climbers in the meeting knew the names of all the climbers on Stanage, but didn't actually know where North Lees Hall was. So that's doing what we're doing now and bringing it all together. Certainly got a great deal of approval from the meeting. I got just a few little silly detail things. On your it's on page 18 on my on the report. We've got Q1 21/22. Is that the first half of? Is that the first quarter of 2021 or the first quarter of 2022, or is it is this quartering something different than quarters of years? Is it quarter of a 2-year period? I wasn't quite sure about that. Next question was, do the CO2 savings that are quoted for putting in ground source heat pumps and air source heat pumps include the CO2 cost of installation and manufacture of these devices? Because there's quite an overhead in the construction side of it. And I think just claiming that we're saving lots of CO2 every year by using that sort of heating somewhat belies the fact that we spent an awful lot of CO2 putting it in the first place, and I think there's some payoff over time in that. I wondered if the Crook barn, you're saying the Crook barn roof is going to be reviewed Q1 24-25. Do we know that it's going to last that long? If it's in a poor state of repair now, it's likely to get even worse in 3 years' time. And do we need to do some remedial work at this point? I also, well, going back to heat pumps and things, I wonder whether heat pumps are the right form of heating for holiday cottages, given that well, my experience of investigating heat pumps for my house is that they would keep the place warmish a lot of the time, but not provide spot heating. So somebody arrives, after the place has been empty for a week, we've kept it at 18 degrees for a week. New arrivals will need it at 25 degrees to be comfortable in the evening. How do we provide that uplift? Is it economic to run it at a base heat throughout the year when maybe lots of the time it isn't being used? It's just something to be considered. It's a real problem for me with my village hall, where I can't run it at that sort of temperature all the time. And just lastly, just coming out of what was being said, Bell's Box only gets one mention. And I heard what you said about we don't know who owns it. And I wonder if it's being used as a group meeting place, whether there's an option to you to use the Crook barn for that, and I'm assuming Bell's Box is just a temporary building or a container or something, and whether there's some ability to use Crook barn for group camping group meetings, and not have Bell's barn on the site. Thank you very much.
Emma, would you like to respond to some of those? I've got a couple of other speakers to come in yet.
Okay, will do. I'll probably hand over in a minute to Matt on the sort of CO2 aspects and the renewable technologies. So I'm certainly no expert on that. The quarters referred to are basically the quarters of the financial year. So Q1 refers to April to June of that financial year, and so on. The Crook barn roof, the timing of that is based on survey by and an estimate of how much life is left in that roof by our building surveying team. It may last longer, it may not. That's the best estimate we've got at the moment. We can keep that, we'll be keeping that under scrutiny to make sure that it doesn't deteriorate further. And if we do have to bring the work forward, then obviously we'll do that. But as I say, it may not even need doing in that year. It may last a bit longer into the future. And then Bell's Box, could we use the Crook barn instead? I've got a shocking revelation to make in that I've never visited Bell's Box. So I'm going to leave that one, I think, for Mark to give that a bit of thought, perhaps after this meeting. Thanks.
Yeah, just very quickly for a bit of context, Bell's Box is a little shepherd's hut which can accommodate maybe 12 people maximum. It's a very small little unit. People sleep on the floor, and there's a very small toilet outside, so a very small little structure. So yeah, that might help a little bit.
Would you like me to come in on the CO2 questions? First off, in terms of the CO2 and the carbon impact of manufacture, that isn't something we've taken into account in the figures. It's something we've discussed as part of the development of the carbon management plan, and it's what's considered to be scope 3 emissions, which we have programmed into our carbon management plan to try and move forward on over the next couple of years. It is very difficult, the data just isn't there at the minute for gathering that sort of information, and it's a hugely involved process for generally manufacturers to provide that information. So I think we're in truth we're probably some way off of that, but I think overall the carbon impact of heat pumps and so on is obviously positive. I think that's been demonstrated more generally. In terms of whether heat pumps are the right form of heating for holiday lets, I take your point. about the kind of recovery time on the temperature of these. I mean, a couple of things in answer to that, really. First off, that how quickly the temperature will recover in a property will largely depend on how the heat pump system is designed. So we can overcome that to a certain extent. We will also have things like wood burning stoves in the hall, and I think in caticide as well, which obviously will help with that type of thing. And also on that, yeah, I think the heat pumps have a lot of advantages in terms of a holiday let in the other forms of renewable energy, such as biomass, for instance, take a lot more attention, and you need someone on site who's there to manage them. Heat pumps you turn on and they do their thing, and they're very, very low maintenance. So that's a big advantage on that type of technology. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Janet Fraser, I think you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed the motion's been moved. I just wanted to second it.
Okay, I'll come back to that in a second. Charlotte Farrell, I think you've got your hand up again.
So only to say on the heat pump thing and the carbon involved in installing, obviously it would have to have a new boiler anyway, I would think, to make, and there's carbon costs involved in that too. So just a thought.
Well, thank you very much for your, before I summarise, I think, Andrew, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, very quickly, I was going to second it, but Janet just got in before me. Just to summarise from my point of view, I'm very grateful for Emma explaining the thinking behind the proposals, and I see the logic of developing Catiside Cottage to provide sustainable income for other elements of the estate, especially the Crook barn and the hall. So I'm very supportive of that. Like Charlotte and others, I'm very keen on the renewable energy proposals, as long as they respect the built heritage around the hall. And this not only will help us reduce our carbon footprint, there's an educational role here as well that will provide, which I think is really important. Can I, at the risk of stating the obvious, just ask Emma to note the Standish Forum's comments, written and verbal comments, and address them where we can. And my final plea, if there's any way we can accelerate the timetable to find options for the Crook barn, then I would really welcome that. I realise your team have a lot on their plate, but if we can prioritise that, I think that would be for everyone's benefit. But otherwise, very supportive of this, Chair.
Chris Vanessa, did you want to come back, Chris?
Please, Chair, thank you. It was just one of my suggestions. I think it needs a bit of an answer. It was the one about the archaeology of the on the hall garden, and the geophysical survey that Vivat did, which indicated there might be some archaeological remains there, which could be of the original first hall, 14th century hall. Can I have some assurance that the garden could be surveyed, a geophysical survey, and any archaeology that turns up will be investigated before it's dug up for the heat pump? Thank you.
Yep, the cost of an estimated cost for the archaeological survey work is included in the cash flow forecast, so that's anticipated to happen. And I'm hoping, although as long as they're willing to do it, I'm really hoping that we can work with the Heritage Action Group when we're doing that work, that investigation work. 'Cause I know they were really interested to know what's there in the grounds of the hall. So it might actually serve two purposes. Yes, it's a practical survey to determine whether or not we can install a ground source heat pump, but it's also helping to reveal some more of the interest that there is around the hall. So thanks.
Yes, just to say, Chris, the Heritage Action Group are very keen to do full surveys and build on existing documentation that you mentioned. So that will be happening, hopefully, once the roadmap from lockdown starts coming up. But we've got the university interested in helping us on that as well.
Oh, good. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Zahid.
Charlotte Farrell, did you have your hand up again? Oh, sorry, step from me.
Zahid, sorry, it's Ginny. I don't know how to make. I'm on my phone, so I can't put my hand up.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to. I note in it's a very comprehensive report, and as others have said, really welcome all the detail that everybody's gone into. I just wanted to have a little bit of clarification on the short-term letting of a historic building. Do we feel that we would have, first of all, the length of letting time? If you think about the last year, we would have been very likely to have had the hall empty for a lot of time. So is it sustainable throughout 52 weeks of the year to be letting the hall on short-term lets? And also, how would we manage the short-term letting to make sure that we don't have any damage to the structure? And that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Ginny.
I've got some estimates of how many lettings might be throughout the year, and those indicate that it would be let for a substantial part of the year and would be inhabited. So, but until we start, we don't know for definite what that might be. So there could be periods when it's vacant. We have got staff on site. You know, we have Mark as our full-time member of staff at North Lees, who is mainly based at the campsite when he's not out and about on the estate. So I'm anticipating that Mark would be able to keep an eye on the property if it is vacant for any period of time. As far as handling the condition of it when it's changed over, we would be getting a private company to do the changeovers for us, and as part of that process they would do an inventory of the contents and the condition of it and report back to us any issues with maintenance that needed addressing. Again, we've got staff on site at the campsite as well who can help us with that. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Well, can I thank all members and officers for the amount of time and effort? And I can say this with both my hat as a member of the authority, but also as a member of the Standish Forum Steering Group. The work that's been put in and the vision that the authority has set out here, and the commitment to costs. You know, we're not talking about small sums of money, and we know we will have to get more resources. But this has, in some ways, actually helped in our relationship with the forum and the users of the forum, and brought a lot of people who thought managing Standish North Lees was simple. It was just about sorting car parks out, and we'll get onto that in a minute. I've come to realise, like as Pete says, like some of the climbers, that actually the edge itself is the iconic face, but there's so much more on this estate. And as Chairman said at the beginning, this is one of our jewels, whether we like it or not, and it's a privilege for the authority to have, and it's a headache. But it's a headache we work with. The 5 recommendations which are on the front page of the report are there. They've been formally moved by Chris and seconded by Janet. Could I ask all members, unless there's any other comments or questions, to now respond to a Democratic Services call, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll call out each member's name. If you can let me know if you're for, against or abstaining from voting on the item. Thank you. Mr Beresford.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Furness.
For.
Professor Haddock-Fraser.
For.
Councillor Heath.
For.
Councillor McCloy.
For.
Councillor McLaren.
For.
Councillor Priestley.
For.
Councillor Tapping.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Waller.
For.
Councillor Woods.
For.
Mr Hamid.
For.
Thank you. That's carried unanimously.
Thank you very much, members. Now, members, we had planned to have a break after the next item. Are you okay to move to the next item before we have a break, or would you like a break now? Shall we carry on?
Carry on.
Deal with the exciting topic of car parks. Okay, Emma, it's your follow-up spot again.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just swapping my papers around that I've got in front of me. Sorry about that.
We need to start this item, Emma, by just highlighting the change.
Yeah, just a second, sorry. So yeah, we've made some minor amendments to the report that you've got in front of you. My colleague Helen Carrington will just go through the detail of that. Essentially, it's about adding in another site to the list of car parks that we're proposing charging for, but I'll leave that bit to Helen. So this is about reviewing our car park management arrangements. The car park provision that we've got in the National Park is really essential for supporting visitors at the moment, providing that welcome and allowing people to come and enjoy the place. The car park infrastructure that we provide and that others provide helps to manage traffic flow within the park, helps to reduce the incidence of verge parking and the damage to roadside flora and the safety issues caused by obstruction of the highway. So the authority aims to review its car park management arrangements every 2 years. The last review was implemented around 2018, so this review is actually overdue. The changes are a vital tool helping to manage parking by increasing the movement of vehicles. People just stay for the time that they actually need, so the spaces are freed up more regularly. And also, it's vital to maintain the visitor facilities that the authority provides. So by charging for parking, it's hoped that visitors will be encouraged to consider their travel decisions in a little bit more detail and might be encouraged to move towards a sustainable transport solution rather than pay for parking. The infrastructure that's associated with the authority's pay and display car parks, the signage, the machines that's situated on our car parks are used to remind visitors of the service the National Park Authority provides and how their contribution by paying parking fees helps to sustain our work. So there's an interpretation element to it as well. Given the high visitor numbers that the park's experienced over the last year and concerns about inappropriate parking, myself and Helen have given some consideration to the timing of this proposal. Is it the right moment to introduce more charges when residents are concerned about the amount of traffic on the highways? But it's worth just clarifying then that what we're asking for here is authority to begin a process to change the tariff, and the actual implementation of those changes is likely to be at least 12 months away following a public consultation period that we're required to do. So I'm just going to hand over to Helen now, who's done most of the detailed work on this proposal. Helen has previous experience of managing pay and display car parks in working for Derbyshire Dales District Council in a former role. She now works for the Peak District National Park. So Helen's going to explain the proposal in detail, the process that we go through and the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. I shall keep my video. I'll switch my video off now straight away. I'm very sorry about that. So I'm going to look at the work that has been done in identifying the car parks and the tariff. So the authority has 44 car parks and we're currently charging 18 of them. So as Emma said, reviewing the tariff and increasing the number of chargeable car parks will help with better management, including traffic management. And as Emma says, we've done a further little review and we would like to include Morley at Yourgrave in the proposals for chargeable car parks. And this will mean an amendment to Table 2 to increase potential income. So I can just go through an additional line on Table 2. We'll read Morley at Yourgrave. We'll put in 20 spaces, which will mean a total of 465 spaces. The potential income on the new tariff would be £6,548, which would give a total income of £152,250. Estimated additional revenue costs of £1,941, giving a total of 26,801, and the estate budget would be car parks and toilets on table 2. It would also be removed from Appendix 1. Inclusion at this stage is fine, as this isn't consultation on including chargeable car parks. We're asking for permission to start the process of consultation to look at chargeable car parks and the tariff itself. So it's a legal consultation, and people can put their views as part of that process. So looking at the 3 recommendations, the first one is to amend the tariff, and this would increase revenue by £68,000 excluding VAT. And we've done that by looking at benchmarking with the other local councils in the area that provide rural parking, the water companies that also operate in our area, the National Trust, and then the other national parks as well. And the tariff that we're proposing is in the range that are charged by the others, so we're not sticking out as somebody that's wanting to charge lots. The tariff has been amended to take into account the inflation, the costs, and the benchmarking, and it gives an average increase of 16% across all the tariffs. And as Emma said, the last review was undertaken in 2016, and obviously was implemented later. So we've it's been 5 years, say, since the last review of tariffs took place. So the other changes to the tariff that we're proposing is to assist machine users. At the moment, they have to click different buttons to say what type of user they are. So we've proposed changes in the tariff so that they can just put the money in, and we know what type of vehicles there. And this will also help with analysis of car park users, because we get figures in the back office. We've increased the coaches amount to 3 hours, which brings it in line with other councils, and then the horse boxes for 4 hours, so that they've got time to have a half day or a day, because the 2 hours was just not feasible. And we've brought the weekly and annual permits in line with other providers for the number of days. So Severn Trent charge for 12 days for their annual permit, and we're proposing to do that for hours. We're also, for recommendation 2, we're looking at future increases, because obviously it's quite something that we could review quite regularly, and we'd like a mechanism to do that to try and simplify it. So as part of the process of revising the bylaws, we'd like to automatically be able to review every 3 years, and to do that we're proposing to link it to the retail price index, obviously with appropriate rounding, so that the tariff is usable. So the third bit is the bit to increase the number of car parks that are chargeable for us, and like Emma says, that's to try and get better management of the car parks and our facilities and traffic management in those areas. So it is slightly different to the report, and we're looking at £152,250 and 13 new car parks to add to the existing 18. So the potential income that we're looking at is based on the average income per space in 1920, which was pre-COVID, so there's no issues there. All the car parks were assessed. Some were discounted for the size or their location and other issues, and these have been outlined in Appendix 1. The sites chosen are generally associated with our estate, so North Lees and the trails, so they would help with better management of these sites and traffic around the sites. The sites are busy and accessed for free, so a small parking charge will help with better management for current and future users. And as part of the introduction of charging at these sites, PR and signage will highlight how the parking fee is invested. So it's not just charging for car parks, we are going to invest in there. Including Morley would mean that we would charge for 84% of the public car park spaces that we have available. And cost to implement, including Morley, would be 113,000, so slightly increased for that new car park. The costs include for officer processing at county, because they're in charge of the traffic regulation order and PR work. And the installation includes the machines, signage, sighting and works to ensure that the machines are accessible for the less able users. we don't charge for blue badge holders, so they don't need to access the machines, but they're less able ones. We're making sure that they would be able to easily access them. We already maintain the sites and facilities, so we're not expecting any cost increases there. We would expect revenue costs, which would vary on the level of use of the car park and the payment method. So how they pay. We've got card processing fees and cash collection fees, enforcement, that kind of thing. We'd use solar powered machines, so they're easier to install, and we use them in several of our car parks at the moment. We're also including Alden House as a trial to see whether we can use that for pay and display on parking when the office is closed. Although we've not made any allowance for income within the proposal because we don't know the demand yet. It's something that we'd like to try, and we'd use one of the older machines when we're renewing them to start that trial. So as I've said, it's a legal process that we have to do to consult on the proposals to bring car parks into charging, and also to review the tariff for both the bylaws that the authority operate in, the traffic regulation order that the Derbyshire County Council manage for us. So the bylaws will be, consultation process will be managed by us, and county will manage the TRO part of it. And adverts will go in local papers and in the car parks for the specified time for people to respond formally to the consultation process. And we also have to consult with statutory bodies and interested parties. So moving on to the risks, we've put those in the report, and the figures are based on the average income per space. Income can vary due to the nature of visits, because we've got rural car parks, and if it's bad weather, then people they're generally less well used. However, we're doing quite well at the moment, and obviously the COVID restrictions have had an impact. Again, timescales. We're relying on timescales for the Derbyshire County Council and also DEFRA, but obviously we'll work to try and keep it on track. But we are relying on third parties to manage part of the process for us. Roadside park and verge parking is a risk. I've mentioned it in the report, although it's not previously increased following the 2016 charge increase and the enforcement changes. It didn't become a problem, and we will mitigate with PR and monitoring of the sites. So we do get complaints about verge parking in areas with free parking at the moment, and those occur on the busiest days. But the PR work at North Lees increased parking revenue by 29%, and if required, this level of work could be repeated for that. As Emma said, the charges could help with turnover of vehicles, as it would put a time limit on their visits. Okay, so I think that kind of covers all the points, if anybody's got any questions.
Okay, before I ask any members to speak, we do have one statement that's to be read out from public participation.
This is a statement from Louise Hawson on behalf of Stanish Forum Steering Group regarding item 6.
Apologies, Chair. We are experiencing some technical issues again. We'll be with you as soon as we can.
The Stanish Forum is a unique consultative body representing the views of the many and diverse users and residents of the North Lees estate. We advise the authority on issues affecting the estate and its users and residents. Apologies, Chair. We are having some slight technical issues, so I will read out Louise Horson's statement. This is a statement from Louise Horson regarding item 6. The Stanish Forum is a unique consultative body representing the views of the many and the diverse users and residents of North Lees Estate. We advise the authority on issues affecting the estate and its users and residents. You can find out more here. We recognise that in the current funding environment, the National Park Authority relies increasingly on car parking charges for income in order to manage and invest in estates like Stanage. As such, we do not oppose parking charges in principle and recognises the income they bring to the estate. We welcome the fact that income from several of the sites proposed for new will be hypothesated to the North Lees estate budget. Stanage, North Lees, lies on the doorstep of the 5th largest city in England, in common with other locations on the edge of the national park. The parking pattern and challenges are exacerbated by the short and ad hoc nature of visits and lack of public transport alternatives. The proposal acknowledges that charging for currently free car parks and increasing the tariff at others carries a risk, as visitors may choose not to use the car parks and will use roadside spaces instead. It is our view that the proposals do not sufficiently recognise the scale of these challenges at Hooks Car, Dennis Knoll and Upper Burbage Bridge, and that proposed mitigations will not be enough to prevent an already difficult and dangerous situation from getting worse. Past experience has shown that introducing charging at car parks in locations with significant free parking options leads to more frequent use of these options on less busy days and at less busy times, instead of filling up the car park first. This leads to more occasions when parking leads to blocked roads and access, road safety issues as pedestrians walk along the road to access point at car parks, damage to verge habitats, creation of new paths onto the moors with associated damage to habitats and important ground nesting bird areas. We believe it is possible to foresee where these problems will arise. We question the suggestion that concerns raised during the 2016 car park review were not borne out at Stanage, where Verge Parking at Hooks Car and Dennis Knoll significantly increased as a result of increased enforcement at Holland Bank. Dennis Knoll. We oppose the proposed new charges at Dennis Knoll. The hard standing area is very small and shaped in such a way that it rarely holds the maximum of 10 vehicles. It is also surrounded by free parking options on the verges along Sheepwash Bank. As such, we suggest it will bring in minimal income and lead to more cars parked further along Sheepwash Bank Road in both directions, even at quiet times. This will increase damage to verges and reduce access and visibility, especially for cyclists. A machine there may also be at risk of vandalism, alongside existing vandalism of the gate on Long Causeway. Hooks Car and Upper Burbage Bridge. While we do not oppose charging in principle, we have safety and ecological concerns about the introduction of charging at Hooks Car and Upper Burbage Bridge. Current evidence suggests that this will lead to more occasions with road safety issues from cars and pedestrians in the road, particularly by Upper Burbage Bridge, and more damage to already churned up verges. At Hooks Car, our concern is more paths being forged across the heathland and the wet sitch from the road. The damage caused to habitats and nesting areas for ground nesting birds by these informal paths was the driving force behind the original creation of the parking area at Hooks Car. We do not want the introduction of charges to lead to damage to these sensitive habitats once more. If charging is introduced, there will be a need for considerable work and engagement to protect the verges without preventing cars from passing each other or intruding on the wilderness environment. Hooks Car also requires better parking space markings to support more responsible and efficient use of the space available. The size of spaces should take into account frequent use by minibuses and vans, often for groups out with local instructors. Holland Bank. Given the increase in charges and the reduced use of cash, especially by younger visitors, it is no longer viable for machines to be cash only in busy locations. Anecdotal evidence suggests that lack of cash to pay fees is leading to parking on verges to avoid fines. The machine at Holland Bank should be upgraded to allow card payment. A landscape approach. We can only support new and increased charges at Standish/Northleys if there is a clear recognition of the knock-on effects for parking patterns locally and across the landscape, and a reasonable plan to address these without pushing the issue or the costs elsewhere. Our preference is a balance of paid car parking and free parking for those who can't pay, and to reduce the numbers of people parking on the verges. Action is also required to provide access that does not require private cars, as there is currently no other viable option for getting to Standish for most visitors, as there are no convenient buses. We believe that a landscape scale solution is required for the parking issues in the area, jointly with Derbyshire County Council, Sheffield City Council and Sheffield Moors Partnership, to develop a sustainable visitor transport strategy that recognises the challenges and the nature of visits to the area, protects the landscape and habitats, and doesn't simply push issues elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Okay, I've got several members wishing to now speak, and I'm conscious of the time, but Chris Finesse, you were first on the list.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I fully support all the recommendations, but I better not move them because I have to leave the meeting, as you know, at 12 o'clock to go to another meeting. But the question of Derbyshire Bridge, I'm surprised that that isn't in the list to be charged, because it has a capacity of 115, you know, so could be a significant revenue earner. I notice it's owned by United Utilities. I mean, how much do we pay United Utilities? And the two other questions: what is the usage of that car park, and do vendors attend the car park?
Do you want to respond to that one, Emma?
Yes, please. Yeah, and Helen may want to add something as well, but I'll initially say that yes, it belongs to United Utilities. We have some other car parks that we also manage on behalf of United Utilities, which is Crowden, which is free, and Torside, which is a pay and display car park. Different arrangements around what we pay to United Utilities, what we take in car parking from Torside. There's toilets associated with all three of them, which are a cost. So overall, the United Utilities arrangements, lease arrangements for car parks, are not currently particularly beneficial for the authority, in my view. Has been tied in with the area management arrangements with the Ranger Service, but now those are looking more like two separate matters. So it's very early for me to say this, but I think we're considering whether or not we want to continue managing those car parks on behalf of United Utilities, and that was the reason why I did suggest to Helen maybe we didn't include Derbyshire Bridge at this stage in looking at charging there. Helen, did you want to say something about the usage levels there? We've obviously got no hard and fast data because it's free at the moment and we don't have a counter on there. Have you got anything you wanted to add to it, Helen?
I mean, it on paper it sounds a really big car park, but in practice it's not. There is a tarmacked area, and then it goes into a rough area, and the rough area is quite small, really, and it is, yeah, it's just not 100% suitable, I don't think. And when I visited the site, there's not been very many cars there, so I just didn't get the feeling that it was a suitable one that would give the income that that the figures suggest. Really, it's just and it's at the wrong end of the one-way system from the Goyet Valley as well. So you're coming out of the Goyet Valley rather than being in it. So you travel through to get to it. It's just a really remote car park.
Okay.
So the other question was: do vendors attend car park? Ice cream or
I think it's one of the ones that's
Burger
included
bar.
on our list of opportunities for refreshment concessions, the mobile ones that are advertised every year. Uptake varies, across all of those sites. So it would only be a small income from a site like that where we'd have perhaps an ice cream van.
Okay. So there aren't any attending.
I don't think so, Chris, but I can't say for certain.
Okay.
Okay.
I've got 6 speakers, so I'll start. I know Charlotte Farrell, Pete Tapping, Jill Heath, Janet all want to speak, but James had his hand up first. So James.
Thank you very much, Heath. Thank you. Emma, I think this is a terrific and very well thought through report. It isn't actually a car park review paper, is it? It's actually a review of car park charging. I would think that we do probably need to think about car park policy. Certainly, all the comments that have been made about antisocial behaviour in parking in places where people shouldn't park, I think you've clearly taken that into consideration, and I compliment you on that. And that's a conundrum, because even if you charged 1 pence, somebody would try and find a farm track to park their 4x4 on. So it's a conundrum. I personally wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't add Alden House to the car parking list, because it's an example again of us not considering policy rather than pricing. Because yes, it might earn us a bit of money, but actually Bakewell's full. So what do you want to do? Fill it even more? No, probably. And so what are you doing? How are we considering these sites as capacity and managing capacity? I go back to our need for a sustainable transport policy. Where do car parks sit in the orbit of sustainable car park transport policy? Where do they sit in relation to Brian's recreational hubs, attract and disperse? There are a lot of questions that emanate from this paper that aren't simply about the money. I really do think this needs to be sucked into a more considered approach to sustainable transport and access right across the park. I mean, if our policy is to work against climate change, which it is, why aren't we charging in 44 of the car parks rather than simply 18? We don't want any more cars, really. We don't. And you said, Emma, yourself, actually by putting charges up, which I applaud, we might be able to encourage users to move to a more sustainable transport solution, which is what you actually said. There is no alternative in most of these instances, so we won't be encouraging anybody to a more sustainable transport solution because there isn't an alternative. So, I welcome the paper. I think you've thought it through really well. Congratulations, it does what it does. But it really, in my view, merits the authority looking in more detail about car parks and their relationship to sustainable transport, to access, to capacity, to attract and disperse, to the recreation hubs. We're looking at something pretty much in isolation here. So I support it, absolutely. I support the recommendations, but this is just a step along the way, I would say. Thank you, Chairman.
Just before I bring in other speakers, just to say, James, and obviously the challenge and the questions you've raised are not just for the authority, they're for all the authorities in the area, particularly the transport authorities. On my list next.
Sorry, could I just clarify? Sorry to butt in. When I mentioned sustainable transport, I was thinking of bicycle, not bus. Okay.
Have you tried to cycle from the centre of Sheffield over to no?
Okay.
With the children.
Okay, we're not going to get into cycle hire charges either here. Okay, next on my list is Janet Haddock-Fraser.
Yeah, a lot of what James said I would echo, and this needs to be thought of in terms of the wider transport policy and sustainable transport. So I'm not going to repeat any of that, and I'm aware of time here. I think I do have I support the principle of what we're doing here and the need to increase parking charges, because we don't want to increasingly incentivize cars at the expense of other transport. But I do have a couple of concerns. One is actually, what are we going to do to mitigate verge parking and parking away from the car parks, particularly those areas that were the car parks that were free and then become chargeable? I think as part of this, we need to think through, and what are we going to do about that, and be explicit about it. My more specific point is about the annual visitor permit. Most of these charges are going up by 16%. Suddenly the visitor permit's 65%. And we're assuming that everybody who's got a permit at £40 a year is going to say, yeah, I'll still have one at £66 a year. There's something called elasticity of demand. I think we could assume half those people won't bother. And so we're not going to get an increase of income of £14,324 because those people won't have an annual permit anymore. I think we need some sensitivity analysis around the income that will be got from those permits, and also the extent to which it will annoy people who've probably used the car parks often off peak for occasional use. In the winter, a lot of them may be residents who are making use of it and not affecting peak load. I just think we need to be very mindful, and we've also used a different methodology for that pricing than we have for the other increases.
Emma, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I can. I will refer to Helen on the specific how she's reached that figure on visitor permit prices. But on Verge Parking and what we're doing to mitigate it, it's always been a concern at Stanage North East, you know, since long before I've been involved with the estate. You know, some of my colleagues that have worked here for much longer have said this has always been an issue, particularly there, although it obviously affects other parts of the park too. Last year we tried the farm tenant actually worked with us to seed the verges with some locally sourced wildflower seed, and we put up some very simple signage explaining what we were doing. And you know, Mark has advised me that he's seen a reduction in verge parking up there as a result of that. I don't know because I'm not on the site day to day myself, but that's what I'm advised by people who are there more frequently. So that's something we could look to do. We can expand that. It was just a small section by Holland Bank car park where we tried that in the first place. We can perhaps look at doing that around Hook's Car, which is currently subject to extensive verge parking, even though there's a free car park there. So it's a bit more complicated than, obviously it contributes, but just saying, well, we're charging for parking and therefore people park on the verge is not the whole picture. I mean, you may have seen some of the coverage on social media a couple of weekends ago where there was extensive verge parking, and it was particularly around Hook's Car because the car park was full, it was over capacity, and that's a free car park. So people then automatically just move on to the verge. I think there's more we can do with communication and engagement to try and help that. It's not going to solve the problem, but we've had a long held wish at North East particularly to have a team of engagement volunteers at peak times to just have a conversation with people when they arrive at site about why we would like them to use the car parks, what the advantages are of using the car parks, and how the money that they pay at the machine, you know, helps us to look after the estate. And I think that would be really useful, and it's something I'm going to continue to pursue, although it's not happening at the moment. So Helen, did you want to talk a bit about the permit pricing?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I looked at that. So obviously, in the last review in 2016, then the prices of the annual permit wasn't put up because you made some changes to the residence permit. So it's been at £40 for a significant number of years. I've also looked at benchmarking with the other authorities and other providers. So we've gone for the same as Severn Trent, who charge for 12 days parking, so for a full day. So that's what we've done. So basically, if you use your permit once a month, then you will have got your money back. So that's why there's such a significant increase, because it's not previously been increased, and to sort of benchmark with other authorities.
But there's obviously a risk there. Pete Tapping, you're next on my list.
Oh, thank you, Zahid. I just okay. One of the things on my list was the thing about the big increase in the annual permits that Janet mentioned. That was noted last night at the BMC meeting, and several people said, yeah, that seems out of kilter. The Stanage sticker got mentioned as well, Emma, but we'll gloss over that. The cost of parking, the two comments that I've had from people about cost of parking is, firstly, nobody uses cash these days, and secondly, the cash amounts are ridiculous. Nobody carries 65p in change around in their pocket, so £4.65 for 4 hours just seems bonkers. And you don't get any credit if you overpay, so I might be able to find £5, but you know, and then I feel somebody's trying to rip me off by not giving me parking for the extra 35 minutes, 35p. Is there any way we can change this to a sliding scale so you pay by half an hour or by minute? I'm just, you know, I know it means changing all the machines and everything, but that seems a much more sensible situation up to a maximum of, you know, £5.50, which is fine. So that was one comment. Certainly a sliding scale seems like a much more sensible idea, and is much more, people would buy into that more. Everybody uses card these days. All machines should be card. And I hear that this thing about putting charges on Moor Lane, putting a machine on Moor Lane. I think the last time we had a machine on Moor Lane, it was taken out because it kept getting stolen, because it's in the middle of nowhere. Everybody knows where it is. And you're not going to get a lot of people parking in Moor Lane because there's a really great big lay-by on the road beside it. So my experience is nobody actually parks in that car park. That's for instance. I wondered if the income from car parking actually includes the cost of repairing the verges and the damage to machines that comes along with this sort of thing. Because if we're saying we've got income from car parking, but we're also paying out for fixing machines and fixing verges and updating verges, coming out of another account, we're not really making that money out of car parks because there's a cost that's hidden somewhere else. And was one more thing. Oh yeah, certainly remote machines do get damaged. Last time I was in Castleton, all the cash machines on the road up to Odin Mine had been patently levered open with a crowbar, and they're all smashed up. So I think remote machines that take cash are certainly in current times hugely. We're going to lose them all. I think the machine last time was Charlie machine at Oak's car. It was smashed up and stolen. So just my observations. Thank you.
I've been just reminded that Helen has to leave us by 11:45. So if I can just ask the members who are wishing to speak if there's a question that they might have about the costings and the pricings, as Peter's just done about the machine, to raise those first. Charlotte is next on my list, and then Jill. Charlotte Farrell.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with what James and Janet were saying. This needs a much wider strategy. I fully support car park charges, but it has to go hand in hand with some sort of enforcement to stop people parking on verges, else they are going to get completely trashed. Any form of restriction to parking just pushes it somewhere else where people can park. We've seen this in Bamford with double yellow lines near Lady Bow, which just pushes the parking up New Road, where and again people could park at Dennis Knoll for New Road, but you know they park all along there to the extent that it causes obstruction. I'm not so confident as Emma about the effects of the car park on the verges round Stanage. Certainly last year, whenever I was walking, there was absolutely hordes of cars parked all along that bottom road. The only bit they weren't parked was the bit where the notices were telling people not to park. So that, and just one other thing about Holland's, whatever it is, car park specifically, is on at least 3 occasions whilst I've been walking around there, I've been stopped by drivers saying, oh, we think there's a car park round here, whereabouts is it? Because there's no signage until you're right on top of it, and they often just end up giving up and parking on the verge. So maybe some signage to tell people there is a car park ahead would be good. So just on the verges, I mean, why is it not possible to get some TRO to make it illegal to park on verges, or even a public space protection order to protect all the verges in the area? We really need to have some radical thinking. I mean, else what's the point of having a beautiful Peak District which is just covered in coloured metal boxes? So that's my point. Thank you.
I'll be coming to the chair of the authority and the chief exec in a minute, but Jill Heath, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think charging for these what are now free car parks will just displace the traffic more and more into the villages. A lot of the villages in the South Peak are really suffering. I've got plans that are going ahead for double yellow lines in 5 locations now, explore pastures, and it is a tremendous problem there. If they charge for the Bloor Pastures car park, it will just make that worse. And also, if I could be more, Milldale's another one, they've got tremendous problems. It just pushes the traffic to where they can park for free. In Alstonfield, could I just clarify the location of the car park and then perhaps come back and ask the question, please?
It's the car park that's next to our public toilet block in Alstonfield.
That's the one where they have the playing fields.
No, it's the one in the centre.
Oh, the smaller one, the smaller one by the toilet.
Yes,
Beg your pardon. The reason I was asking, I've been having long discussions with the parish council about the one that the parish council own, and this is what I just wanted clarifying in my mind. I'd forgotten about the other one, because the parish council have had problems with camper vans parking overnight, and we've been dealing with the legal team at the county to put an order on to stop overnight parking, which the parish council are taking up. And it was suggested while in the discussions that they could perhaps charge for the car parking. And the parish council were up in arms. Oh no, the village is busy enough. We just push them out into the village. So I know the answer from that parish council straight away if you do the consultation. And I'm sorry, but the recommendations 1, 2, 3. I'm going to abstain because I can't park for the third one that charging is introduced to these additional proposals. When we say potential additional sites, we're talking with previous speakers if it's done and dusted and they are going to be allocated if we vote for 3. Could you just clear that up for me, please? Are we doing more work on the potential? Are we asking the villages that are involved, or are we, approving it today?
I think, as Helen mentioned, there's a consultation phase as part of the process. It's a legal requirement, so villages would have an opportunity. So what we're deciding today is approval to enter into this process, which could mean that we generate the amount of additional income that's mentioned in the report. We require, understanding orders, your permission to do anything that's going to generate that level of additional income potentially. So the consultation phase is still to come, and it may be that some of these sites drop off the list because we'll get stronger and valid objections to them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I just wanted clarification because I will obviously be in contact with the parish councils. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. That's a very important point. Just to remind members, what we're approving has to then go to a formal consultation. So this is not, as Jill says, done and dusted. Andrew McCloy.
Chair, I'll try not to be negative about this. A 65% increase in the visitor permit is bonkers. I understand we're trying to maximise income, but it's not the right way to go about it. This visitor permit is actually used by a lot of local people who I know are visiting other parts of the Peak District, but it's partly a residence permit, and I think 65% increase is going to, I agree with Janet, it's going to be counterproductive, and I know one or two people who probably will not renew it as a result. That's one thing. I'm not against charging car parks or introducing new car park charging or putting the prices up, because all our partners charge. I think car drivers need to put something back. I agree with all of that, but there are site-specific issues, and I am worried about displacement and verge parking. And I do agree that Standish North Lees, in particular, where the habitat is so fragile, we need to take an holistic view. And I know officers are aware of this, but we do need to understand knock-on effects and so forth. And finally, I cannot agree with Morley Yulgrave going in this. We're not learning lessons of history here. It was left off for a reason before, because as Pete Tapping says, we both live locally. There's a huge amount of lane parking outside where people before, and it's that will not work. I can't agree to that one.
Well, I think we probably defer to your better local knowledge than mine and Helen's. Would it help if we said, because I think the permit to me is not a big deal. So if the increase that we've proposed is felt to be excessive, we could review that and look at it in line with the way that we've reviewed the other charges. But as Helen said, that charge for permits has been in place for a really long time. We didn't review it in the last review because we were making some other changes. So there used to be an even cheaper residence permit.
Yeah.
And there was something else with permits that we altered as well. I can't remember now what exactly it was. So we thought that probably just bringing them all together into one type of permit was enough of a change in the last review. So this time we're I guess we were looking at making up that ground to a reasonable charge, but we can reconsider that. It's not.
Emma, I quite understand that, and I see the logic, and I support you on that. I just think the level of increase, the jump, is probably a little bit too high and might be counterproductive, and is not really explained. And on the Morley Yulgrave, yeah, please understand. You need local intelligence for one or two of these decisions, and the reasoning in your paper why it was left out still stands. I don't understand what has happened since that paper was written that's changed, because and this is a very specific example, and I say this quite unashamedly as your local member for Yulgrave. It will displace parking into a village already suffering enormous problems with visitor parking in the village. So there are reasons possibly where we may want to keep certain car parks or take a different approach to certain car parks, but I'm not against the principle of charging some car parks. Thank you, Chair.
Right, Sarah Fowler.
Thank you. Just a couple of things to pick up the annual permit. By comparison, High Peak Borough Council charges £120 for annual permits. Staffordshire Moorlands £250 to £370. Derbyshire Dales for a second residential permit costs £60, and that's not in peak time. And the Lake District National Park Authority for one car in one car park charges £250. So I think what we've recommended here is a reasonable amount, given that we haven't increased it for quite some time. You don't want to know what Lake District charges for any car in any car park. So can I just put a bit of balance into what's happening elsewhere on this, on that? Another thing I just want to share with you is that the work that we do in car parks does provide that important visitor management approach, doesn't provide that important interpretation, as Emma has said. It's also really important that we as an authority have an income to enable us to carry on maintaining and looking after our car parks, to carry on doing that visitor management and that interpretation. If we don't have a suitable income, we can't do that. And actually it also enables us in a number of car parks to maintain public toilets, or a number of other public toilets aren't being kept. So there's a valid reason why we're seeking this increase, to enable us to have a valid income, to enable us to provide those facilities. I absolutely get the comment about wanting to take a longer term look at this, and we are doing that. There's an operational need, and James, I like the way you described it in terms of this is a step along the way. Please, members, understand we recognise there is a wider need for looking at visitor management and car parking and traffic. We know that because as officers we're dealing with that day in, day out in terms of what's happening with lockdown easing at the moment. And what we're doing is we're using this year as a way of engaging with highways authorities and our partners to look exactly at some of the measures you're trying to identify here in terms of other ways of dealing with this. And we're trying to we're learning by doing here in what we're doing. And in parallel with that, I am having quite senior level conversations with a number of people locally and nationally about how we can develop a long-term solution. It is going to be a long-term solution. We do have to recognise a step along the way of removing cars is actually accepting cars for the short term, because we need to provide an alternative. So we are looking at that, and we're using this year as a way of learning so we can bring something back to you in the future. So another thing, I think what we're trying to encourage here is a car parking charges is a way of giving back to the national park and the work that we're doing. So if we can see it in that light as well. I know exactly the realities of what you're sharing, and I think the consultation process that we will go through will help us listen and pick up some of the concerns you've raised. Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you summed that up very well, and Andrew yourselves. The consultation process, I'm sure, will reinforce some of the points that members have made. And I do think we need to take up the suggestion of revisiting your modelling about the annual permit, Emma, and look again at that increase. But we have a recommendation. It is about charges. It's we're not trying to attempt car management, car parking and car park management in the whole of the Peak District just by ourselves, but this is about the charges. So the paper has 3 recommendations in front of you, which, as we say, I would urge Emma and Helen to go back and look again at some of the figures for the annual permit. But this is obviously information that then has to go out to consultation, and the feedback you've had about Morley. Although I think the whole of Appendix A, those car parks, is another discussion anyway about ownership, etc. So if there are no other comments, can I ask the members to be ready to give their decision and ask Democratic Services to take a call?
Thank you, Chair. I'll call out each member's name, and if you can let me know if you're voting for, against, or abstaining from voting on the item. Thank you.
Sorry, Belinda. Sorry, it's Andrea. So I might have missed it. Have we had a mover and a seconder for the recommendations? So we need to have somebody to move and second, and then we can go for a vote on what then has been moved and seconded.
Chris Finesse, I think, had moved it originally, and Pete Tapping is second.
I think Chris was minded to, but he thought he was going to be leaving the meeting before the conclusion. So we do need somebody to formally move in second. It's 10 to 12, Chris.
Move the recommendation.
Pete Tapping, second. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I will now take a roll call on this item. Mr. Beresford.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Finesse.
For.
Professor Haddock-Fraser.
For.
Councillor Heath.
Abstain.
Councillor McCloy.
For.
Councillor McLaren.
For.
Councillor Priestley.
For.
Councillor Tapping.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Waller.
Abstain.
Councillor Woods.
Abstain.
Mr. Hamid.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's 3 abstentions and otherwise carried.
Thank you very much, members. Thank you, officers. It is 7 minutes to 12. I'm suggesting a break. Well, not suggesting, I'm demanding a break. Can we break till 12 and then reconvene for the rest of the meeting at 12? I will try and endeavour to get us through to and finish by 1 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, I think most people are on their way back here. Thank you very much, members, for your robust and informed discussion before the break on the two items. We have 4 items now for discussion. Again, there's quite a lot to get through. We're starting with Moors for the Future Partnership, and we have Christine and Kate Morley. And as we're running late, Chris, you and Kate have now got to be very slick and polished. I think if everybody's here, I'd like to start again. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Just before we have a presentation to take you through this, which we thought would be the easiest way to do it, really. But just before we go to that presentation, if I can just introduce myself, Christopher Dean, head of Moors for the Future, just in case there's any new members who haven't come across us. And also, more importantly than that, if I could introduce Kate Morley. A lot of you will remember Sharon Davison, who was our previous Programme Office Manager, which Kate is now doing that role, and has had a very steep learning curve to get to grips with our 83 cost centres over one of our busiest delivery years. I just wonder if, Kate, you just want to introduce yourself quickly so people can see you on the screen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Morley. 6 years with Moors for the Future as a project manager before I filled, well, hopefully, Sharon's very large shoes in October last year. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Kate. If you could put the presentation on for us, whoever's driving that would be great. I'll switch my video off just to ensure my connection stays okay, really. There's quite a lot of information here in this. Members might want to take a few notes as we go through to remind you of any questions that you might have when we get to the end of it. We'll try and be as rapid as we can through it, really. First of all, the purpose of the visit, our visit to you today, is an annual one. It's to present and seek recommendation for our operational plan to our strategic management board. That may be an odd thing to ask, but there is nothing to approve in it. All of the items in it have either been approved or they are pipeline items which will come back to this committee or seek approval through standing orders in other ways. It is, however, really useful if you can recommend this to our strategic management board because it just carries a little bit more clout when it does that. It's serving the purpose of bringing everything together is the operational plan. Also, this time we are asking you to approve our interim business plan. We produced an interim business plan last year. The plan over the preceding year was to produce a longer 5-year plan. Because of the year that we've had and because of the volatility of the funding landscape around us, we've decided to go for another short-term business plan because, to be honest, with the volatility of the situation in front of us, if we produced a 5-year plan, which was the intention, it likely wouldn't be worth the paper it was written on by the time we got to this time next year because the anticipated changes coming forward, really. So that's what we need to do today, basically. Next slide, please. The next couple of slides I'm going to hand over to Kate, which is a look back and a look forward of our business outcomes. Kate.
Thank you, Chris. Chris gets to do the exciting bit and I get to do the dry numbers, so I'll rattle through for these. So last year we had an expenditure on conservation outcomes of 5.2 million. We employed 33 members of staff costing £1.1 million, and we invested quite a lot in local and national specialist contracting businesses as part of that. In programme delivery, which is the 5 programme managers, we had £100,000 contribution from the authority towards support those costs, with the remainder of 203,000 from partner contributions and on costs for delivery, and that's those figures include 277,000 back to the authority as corporate overhead. Next slide, please. And to look forward to the next year, you'll have noticed within the operational plan, we're currently looking at an expenditure of about 4.7 million confirmed in pipeline for this year coming. 31 staff and a salary cost of 1.1 million again. And the programme delivery, £100,000 contribution from the authority, with the remainder again from partner contributions and on-cost delivery. But we're also looking at, we're forecasting a 272 corporate overhead contribution towards the authority in this financial year coming. Thank you. Next slide. Pass you back for Chris for that one so we can do the exciting stuff.
Thank you very much, Kate. I think the figures, at the extent they are actually quite exciting anyway, really. It's been a very significant delivery year. It's probably been our biggest delivery year in our 18-year history. And our year in review will come out later in the year, and there'll be further detail in that. We've just got to the end of a busy delivery season, and the detail of the areas of things we've still got to sum up and uncover. It should be noted that this has continued during the pandemic, so this massive delivery has been going on with extra measures through the COVID situation. We put in, and we did win an award from the Campaign for National Parks for Park Protector Award for the way in which we'd handled work through the pandemic, which we were quite pleased to receive. We've worked over approximately 60 sites, 40 project themes over a range of restoration work, really. A couple of things I would like to pick up on. We are moving from the basic stabilisation work, where we're doing nurse grass crop work and altering soil chemistry just to get some vegetation back in bare areas, to more and more moving into true restoration work. 10 to 12 square kilometres of sphagnum planting during this season, which is really quite exciting. An extensive carbon content survey throughout the Bamford catchment, and we still managed to keep our two big volunteer campaigns on monitoring, both the vegetation monitoring and the dipwell campaigns, going for this year. One of the longest serving data sets in the uplands now, which is really useful. And if we could go to the next slide and the video, please. Another thing that we've been working on is the biggest WEG grant scheme, which has put in over this season 10,000 gully blocks, such as the ones on the video there, taking the power out of the erosive force of the water out in these gullies, stopping it chewing further peat away and sending it into the reservoir and the river system, and starting the restoration process, holding sediment back in those locations. A lot more to come on that as well. This work has all been going on between the Roaches and Ilkley Moor and across to Holcombe Moor in the west as well. If we can move on to the next slide. Looking forward, this will be a critical time for us in terms of bidding and business development. Our major project, More Life 2020, comes to an end during this year. We're looking towards a Nature for Climate Fund bid. Your chair has been consulted recently on a bidding action into this fund, which will be for between 4 and 8 million. The criteria of the fund is not out yet, so we're not quite sure how well we will sit within that criteria. We are also responding to a lot of other grant opportunities. We've been asked for a huge amount of shovel-ready projects this year. natural capital opportunities are coming to the fore in a big way, and public giving and social responsibility is providing funding which didn't exist before as well. Work-wise, we have already started up work with Yorkshire Water and Severn Trent on their next asset management programme out to 2025. We will be bringing More Life 2020 to a close, and there's a busy programme of other work in the operational plan. Next slide, please. One thing I hadn't mentioned was Great North Bog as well, a big mechanism coming forward which we're involved in. Just to touch on the risks, operationally and on the ground, the biggest risk for sometimes been fires. The picture in front of you is from the Marsden Moor fire this week. This is still happening with a depressing regularity every time we get a dry spring. We're looking towards putting more resources and more effort into trying to resolve this in the future. The other business risk that we have, which we've had some time, is around core funding. It is still quite difficult to get people to pay for people, really. So that remains a challenge and a risk to us. Next slide, please. We have, through this period of time, put a new strategic management board together as one of the actions from our More Business project. We've got 14 partners sitting on that board. Some of them are same partners but new faces, but we have 3 significant new partners, the Heather Trust and the BMC, British Mountaineering Council, and Trehodos Bank have joined the Strategic Management Board, which is really quite exciting, really. Next slide, please. You can click through the next 5 till it gets to the end of this, really. So it is another 2 clicks, I think. It's a time of concern because of the pandemic and the public finances that will probably present us with, but it's also a time of huge opportunity. Throughout all my 18 years of working here, we've never had such a massive interest in peat, in upland peat. COP26 is taking place in the UK in November, and that matches with the 45-year anniversary of the first picture on this run of pictures being taken. So there's a huge opportunity out there with grants, funding, other things that are coming forward into this environment. There's also a huge amount of difficulty facing us with the public finances, probably as well. As I keep saying to our staff, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it to carry on pushing ahead with this. The report that we've put to you has got 2 recommendations in it. The first recommendation is that we're asking the Programmes and Resources Committee to support the operational plan for 2021-22 and recommend it to the Most of the Future Partnerships Strategic Management Board and operational management groups. There's then a second recommendation around the business plan where we are asking Programmes and Resources Committee to approve the Most of the Future Partnerships Interim 2021-2022 business plan. I will leave it there and hand you back to the chair.
Thank you very much, Chris and Kate. Again, a lot of stuff, a lot of high figures, amazing work, as we know. Okay, I'll open it up for any questions or comments. Andrew and Chloe.
Chris and Kate, thank you very much. Good presentation, and again, really tight, informative, positive operational plan going forward. I'm really impressed, as I've never failed to be impressed, at the output from your team. It's, even when the going gets tough in terms of Brexit and lockdown, you keep delivering. My concern, and you touched on it, Chris, is over core funding, because we have decided that the authority's contribution will be removed within 2 years towards core funding. you've indicated that there is still a gap there. What's the likelihood we're going to get towards the end of the 2 years and there will still be a gap there? And what will happen then? What's the contingency then?
Shall I take that one, Chair?
Please, Chris.
Yeah, you're right to recognise that as a challenge. If we remember Bogfest, the conference we had now 4 years ago, we were given a big message from members at that to look in two particular ways for future funding. One was that we weren't really engaging with the charitable sector at all at that time, and the other was that we weren't really engaging with the corporate sector. And as we sit in the middle of the Northern Powerhouse, surrounded by 11.5 million people in the regions around us, we should really be looking towards that. So as far as the charity sector is concerned, we have had much more success than I expected. The BMC working with us were aiming to raise 25,000 in 1 year, this year that's just gone, their first year of running the climate project. I was a little sceptical about that really, and must apologise to the BMC because they have actually pulled in 30,000 through the pandemic, and it's opened my eyes to the possibilities there. We've also had two major high net worth donors, one committing 25,000, the other committing 20,000 as well. So there's an opportunity there that we are now starting to seize. The issue for us really is that we can't rely on it in the year that we're in. So the last year's income, we can then start to think about spending that next year and so forth. So charity sector, we're doing quite well. I think that there's opening there. We're working with the foundation, Peak District National Park Foundation. Great success with them, and we're working with the British Mountaineering Council, success with them as well. So there is evidence that that's going to bring funding in. The corporate sector, we've gone down the road of natural capital. Very, very difficult to make assessments and try and get that moving. Nobody yet is actually been that successful at trying to get payments for ecosystem services, payments for natural capital. We've got a project running, and we've made a bid into the Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund, if I've got that right. So we hope to have two projects that are informing us of ways of making business work. I think that'll be a slower burn before we start seeing outcomes in that direction. But we shouldn't lose sight of the corporate social responsibility. Not all large businesses want to commit funding through a natural capital route. They want to commit funding through other routes as well. So we have had some success there. It's always been really difficult to get partners to commit to co-funding, because again we're back in the scenario where people do not like paying for people, and what I need is people more than anything else. So it is difficult to do that. I think with the opportunities that are in front of us, we're likely to be able to have more success than a lot of other services in the national park in cutting down the contribution from the national park into our work and seeking it elsewhere. So I think we should do so just because we're in a better position to do so. Whether we can get to a point where we have no reliance on the authorities' funding in 2 years' time, I can't answer that, I'm afraid. I don't know how successful we will be with that, but we are certainly going to try.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Rob Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like to thank and congratulate Chris and the Moors for the Future team for this plan and for the work that they've done this year, which I think has been absolutely amazing given the context in which they've been operating. So, you know, well done. I think this is a fantastic programme. Just to comment on one of the points that Chris made, wildfires do continue to be a real threat. We've had a very serious fire again on the Marsden Moor area in my patch of my Kirklees patch, and it's done significant damage, including damage to restoration work that's been carried out on the moor in the last couple of years by Moors for the Future and the National Trust. I think the one good thing from it, one positive thing from it, is that looking at the damage that's been done, it appears that where restoration has been carried out, the damage is less significant to the underlying peat than in other areas, which there's a small area which is owned by private shooting interests, where the peat itself does seem to have actually caught fire in this recent fire this week. But I think going forward, the key thing is that a lot of work has got to be done looking at wildfires, because certainly on the Marsden Moor area over in the adjoining areas in Saddleworth, this just seems to keep reoccurring. It's only 2 years since we had an even bigger fire. And every time these things are happening, they're costing a vast amount of money in terms of the cost of extinguishing the fire, but they're also damaging the work that we're doing, damaging things like willow dams and wooden dams that have been put in place. So I think this has got to be a very high risk factor and something that all partners involved in this kind of work need to focus on in the future. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Sarah Fowler?
Just really briefly, Chair, in response to that, we are working collectively across all partners as a National Park Authority and with moorland owners around fire risk and looking at fire risk assessment. And actually, it's been seen as groundbreaking work, the work that we're doing there with DEFRA. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions for Chris and Kate? If there are, Andrew?
I was going to say otherwise, I will kind of move that we accept the proposal. I think Chris and Kate, the absence of lots of comments does signify support and approval and admiration for what is being done up on the moors. And especially, as I say, at this time of uncertainty, you say, Chris, in your report that the plan was delayed because of COVID, and yet on the ground you've been able to deliver still. And I suppose there is the worry going forward that there may still be delays and hiccups because of further lockdowns and further restrictions. However, your 1 year short-term approach is echoed by so many other organisations and authorities that I endorse that. I agree. Sorry, Chair, I didn't mean to take this as another opportunity to have a speech, but I agree entirely with Chris, looking forward to COP26 when there will be such a focus on issues like peatland restoration. And we know the government is bending its mind to the England Peat Strategy, and the more funding is coming our way. The interest just on its own that the Great North Bog idea has whipped up has been terrific. And that idea of us and us in the Royal We Moors the Future and the National Park working beyond our borders, joining up with other protected areas on probably one of the single most important contributions to combating climate change in terms of locking up carbon in peat has never been more important. So, Chris, I'm very happy to move this and to congratulate you and your team for your hard work.
Thank you very much. Could I have a seconder? Janet Fraser, yeah. And just to endorse that, Chris and Kate and the team, absence of discussion is not absence of support and appreciation. Democratic Services, could we take a call, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will again read out each member's name. If you can let me know if you are voting for, against or abstaining, please. Mr Beresford.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Furness.
It's gone.
Gone. Oh, yes, sorry. Professor Haddock Fraser.
For.
Councillor Heath. Councillor Heath. Sorry, we can't hear you if you are responding. Councillor McCloy.
For.
Councillor McLaren. Councillor McLaren, I can see you there, but I can't hear anything. Councillor Priestley.
For.
Councillor Tapping.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For, and can I give my apologies for leaving the meeting now? I have got another engagement. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Waller. Councillor Waller. Oh.
No.
Councillor Woods.
For.
And Mr Hamid.
For.
Thank you. That's carried.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Chris and Kate. Item 8 on the agenda is review of occupational safety and health policy. And then we'll have a second item on health and safety. Where is John? John, wait, there you are. Sorry, John, lost you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Two hopefully fairly routine items that importantly come to this committee as part of the governance route for approval. The authority is, of course, ultimately responsible for ensuring the authority is properly managed in regards of occupational safety and health. And the ways it guarantees that is through the reports it gets from me and others and through approval annually of the policy. So two items. I'll take the policy first, please. So you will have seen in the papers the draft occupational safety and health policy for 2021. Normally, I should say that this committee would get these two items separately. The policy would normally come to you towards the end of the previous year, so it would have come in sort of December 2020 for approval from the 1st of January. But because of the organisational changes we've been going through and changes to people's roles and responsibilities and the structural organisation of the authority, that was delayed until now. But it's since been through consultation at management team and at our health and safety committee, and so is now here for you for a final approval for adoption as of today. A draft policy has been in place up until now this year. So only minor changes to the policy really. The strap line right at the top of it adopts the most appropriate value that we now propose, the care value, caring for the park and particularly for the people that work for it and with us. Hopefully the policy itself is fairly familiar to most of you. It's set out in three parts. Part one, setting out our intentions and principles. Principles are based around awareness, that people are aware of the health and safety issues, of their role, their responsibility, and how they perform their role and those responsibilities. Second part is competence, how we ensure that people have the wherewithal to do that. Big focus on training, which I'll speak a bit more in the annual report, which is the next item. And compliance, how we check that people are complying with all of the health and safety risk controls that we put in place, all of the risk assessment we do, and so on and so forth, accident investigations, and how we measure that performance. Part two talks about delivery and more specifically the roles and responsibilities various people have for supporting the policy, starting off with the members. Importantly, at section 5.1.1, or members have the duty to ensure that occupational safety and health is effectively managed And having delegated the authority to deal with that to the management team, they receive reports to this committee to give them positive assurance that those management arrangements are in place and are suitable and sufficient. Goes through the rest of the roles and responsibilities of key people for supporting and implementing the policy, and part 3 is about the governance arrangements. There is an appendix to this which is available separately, which is linked to many of the other documents for more specific issues like dealing with asbestos and Legionella and so on and so forth. And that sets out more specific responsibilities for people like myself, members of the property team, to manage those issues. So that is the policy. It's here for final approval by the committee. If there's any questions, I'll take those now.
Are there any questions for John, or members happy to approve this policy, as we will do through the recommendation? It is ultimately our responsibility, and without getting complacent, we do rely on how successful this approach has been and on the staff to deliver. Andrew?
Yep, I've read it through. I'm very happy with it. Thank you for your presentation, John. I'll move the recommendation, please.
Somebody second? Janet? Okay, Janet heard it. Fraser second. Could we take a call on that recommendation then for approving the policy?
Thank you, Chair. I'll call out each member's name. If you can let me know if you're voting for, against, or abstaining from voting on this item, please. Mr. Beresford?
For.
Councillor Farrell?
For.
Professor Haddock-Fraser?
For.
Councillor McCloy?
For.
Is Councillor Heath back with us?
Yes, sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you. Councillor McLaren?
For.
Councillor Priestley?
For.
Councillor Tapping?
For.
Councillor Walker? No, it's gone.
Who's left? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Councillor Waller? No. Councillor Woods?
For.
And Mr. Hamid?
For.
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 8 is the annual report, which we also receive at this committee. John, back to you for the highlights, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, the other item is the annual report, which is a retrospective report for the last year, which of course has been much affected by the COVID pandemic. And so you won't be surprised to see a lot of references to the work that we've had to do over the last year. A lot of our normal working arrangements have altered significantly. Many colleagues working remotely from home, and so a lot of work's gone on making sure we keep communicating with those colleagues. The latest staff surveys just going out at the moment to ask about their concerns and preparations for more people to return to work potentially as we progress through the lifting of sort of the step down of precautions as we move through the government roadmap. Throughout the year, we've repeatedly produced and changed and amended risk assessments and working arrangements for people as we've either come back to work in various areas or gone back into lockdowns and so on. That continues. So risk assessments are regularly reviewed for the generic risk assessment for the park as a whole, but then more specific ones for people working in cycle hire and visitor centres and so on. HR colleagues have regularly published health and well-being guidance and communications, going through regular updates and inviting people to talk to each other and talk to us about any concerns they've got. And any colleague that raised particular or specific concerns was then individually followed up with, made sure that we've done whatever we could to support them. So a lot of the work that a lot of people have done has been in response to the pandemic, but also trying to make sure we can continue as much work as we can in a safe, suitable and efficient way. So the report goes through the performance. As I say, it's looked at that very much. The performance indicators haven't really changed very much. Those figures in table 1 for the end of the year, many of them are about training that we've already completed, and face-to-face training, of course, has been interrupted significantly during the last year. Although we're now right on the verge of being able to offer remote training, IOSH, managing safely courses, which I first delivered to other national parks in February of 2020, but we're now more or less ready to launch remote training for ourselves and for other parks to refresh that training. So we'll be providing that again in June. That'll be the first course that I expect to go live for that. I'll talk more about incident and accident reporting as we go on through the report. Apart from the pandemic, there haven't been any serious incidents to report on up through the management team for referral or for action. The policy we've talked about, and that's now been approved, the new version of the policy for the review. Training I've talked about. Accidents and incident data, very familiar story really. We're slightly reduced number of accidents and incidents this year, as we might expect with the restriction on the amount of work that's continued. But the accidents and incidents that we have had are very familiar: slips, trips and falls, bumping into things, one vehicle accident, one accident that's been categorised as a violent and aggressive incident, involves some planning colleagues. The accident reporting trend is represented in figure 2. As you can see, slightly, significantly down to 2020, but the trend over the last 5 or 6 years continues to be slightly up as we encourage people to report incidents, and particularly near misses. We did set a target to try and achieve a 50-50 split on near misses versus actual accidents, and that's reduced significantly this year, and we will regenerate the approach of trying to encourage near-miss reporting as we come back to work this year. But I think that's probably been significantly affected again by the way we've been working, with people working more remotely and most colleagues working from home. Visitor incidents and accidents are also reported, and again, this is a very familiar story. All of the incidents and accidents reported are either to do with slips and trips or through accidents involved with cycle hire, people falling off bicycles, etc. Mostly all minor incidents, a couple of more serious ones to do with cycle hire where people have had to go to hospitals. They've all been investigated and followed up, and whatever appropriate action is taken. And the final part of the report looks at priorities and actions for 2021. So we're continuing, obviously, at the moment to support staff during the hopefully the final stages of the pandemic, as we move towards lifting more restrictions and returning to a more normal way of working. Though of course there might be some more permanent changes, and the staff survey I referred to earlier is trying to gauge, what the pattern of working for some staff will be as we go forward, whether there'll be a greater home workplace and home balance arrangement for some, and how that will work and how we'll continue to work in a safe way. We've now prepared to provide workplace COVID testing for asymptomatic people using the lateral flow devices. I've got a stock of those already at Alden House for workplace testing for people who are coming into work, and we'll be starting that for staff next week. And I'm waiting for delivery of stock for workplace collect testing, where staff can collect the equipment necessary for testing and then take it away and do it at home or do it remotely and elsewhere. The asymptomatic testing will just be another cog in the machine of protection that we'll be employing against sort of infection of COVID-19. We'll be reviewing the key performance indicators as we look at the new ways of working as we come back next week, and overhauling various topic-specific management arrangements, the things that sort of will appear in Appendix A, looking at how they're managed by managers, taking into account the new roles, the new teams that are now being consolidated within the authority. We'll continue to offer training and advice to other parks, as I've been doing throughout the pandemic, talking to colleagues at other national parks and through organisations such as the Visitor Safety Group, which represents lots of similar bodies, the National Trust, Forestry Commission, RSPB, etc., where we share a lot of information and compare what we're doing with what they're doing for some assurance and also for sharing solutions to common problems. A series of webinars that I've contributed to and taken part in have helped with that. So that is my annual report. I'm obviously happy to take any questions about that. And then the recommendations are that the committee recognises the work that's been done in the previous year as being suitable and satisfactory for managing occupational safety and health at the authority, and endorses the proposals for recommendations for work going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, again for a very good and comprehensive report, despite all the trials. Andrew, would you like to speak?
Yes, I will move acceptance of the report. John, thank you very much. There's a lot of really positive stuff in there, despite all the difficulties in the last year. I'm particularly heartened, and as I would expect, our duty of care towards our staff and volunteers. And I'm thinking with all the remote working and the COVID challenges, the mental health of our staff, as well as anything else, and how we have actively followed up those who have expressed concern or where there are issues. I think I'd expect to see that, but I'm very pleased to be reassured by that. I'm also very pleased, John, that you continue to share your wisdom with other national parks as well, because we are a family of national parks. We share very similar issues and setups, so it's great to share our expertise. So thank you. One kind of sort of a little bit left field question from me: where do members fit in all this? Because there's staff and volunteers that run throughout this. What about members' health and safety, especially in these days remote working? Do you factor that in at all?
Certainly, members are included in our concerns. I'm not sure if you've been included in all of the regular staff communications from HR about mental health and well-being. Do all staff or emails get sent to distributed to members? I'm not sure how that works, or whether domestic services.
No, John, they don't, and I'm not asking them to be, but I'm just curious in terms of your health and safety remit, which is very comprehensive for staff and volunteers. Whether, and I suppose I'm looking at Teresa and Sarah here as well, whether there's a moment where you consider the needs and the issues surrounding our 30 members.
Shall I say something, Sarah? Yeah, I think we're moving into a new phase with our values and behaviours, in that we're working towards one team. We're working to bring together employees, volunteers, casual workers and members. So I can imagine going forward, I can speak with Andrea around how we can look to ensure that members are also embraced in that one team approach.
So yeah, happy to do that. Members are obviously included in the health and safety policy, as both having the responsibility for doing, overseeing this work, and also the individual responsibility for looking after their own health and safety. So we've got it covered in the policy. We can look at whether there's anything we can include in the annual report as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. There was nothing specific, but I just raised that as a point going forward, that if we are one team, that includes everyone, including the 30 members who I know have responsibility for their own health and safety. But if we are one team, we share our expertise and we share our support for each other as well. Thank you.
I'll come to you, Janet, but Andrea, yes?
Yes, I mean, obviously the last year we haven't been all together, but the Democratic and Legal Support Team do work with individual members, and so we do address the needs of members when we're in the building. Obviously, we're going to be moving to face-to-face meetings. We're working very closely with John, and so that will bring on board again the members. But yes, you are you are part of that when we're in the building, and that's part of the reason we ask you to sign in, sign out. So there is that takes place on a regular basis behind the scenes, and we work individually with members with any specific needs that they have, being able to access buildings, etc. But it is something that we have talked about, and how we need to look at the language and make sure that the one team approach is covering everybody. So I will work with Teresa moving forward on this. Thank you, Andrew.
Janet Fraser.
Yeah, I mean, as with the Moors for the Future paper we've just had, a lack of questions and comments, John, doesn't mean a lack of interest. I think this is a really good report and very comprehensive, and I want to second the motion, please.
Yeah. Are there any other comments? I think we've raised the interesting thought of members' health and well-being, but we'll leave that for officers to work on. If there are no more questions for John and the team, can I ask Democratic Services to do a call on the recommendations, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll read out each member's name, and if you can let me know if you're voting for, against or abstaining. Thank you. Mr Beresford.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Professor Haddock-Fraser.
For.
Councillor Heath.
For.
Councillor McCloy.
For.
Councillor McLaren.
For.
Councillor Priestley.
For.
Councillor Tapping.
For.
Councillor Woods.
For.
And Mr Hamid.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's carried.
Thank you very much. Item 10, which is the last item for discussion, is the volunteering update. And if I could ask Rachel, I think is going to be assisted by Teresa, to quickly talk through the paper.
Hello everybody, I'm Rachel Morban, the volunteer coordinator. I'm going to turn my camera off because I've got very high CPU usage. So I'm here today to give you an update on the volunteering across the authority over the last year and a brief look forward. The recommendation in the report is that we continue to focus on the four kind of main elements of the volunteering programme as outlined in the volunteering action plan in Appendix 2. This is a draft at present, and it's looking at investing in our people, systems and processes for volunteering, resources and infrastructure, and volunteering development to ensure that we diversify our offer for and kind of a fit for the future. And also that the volunteering annual update is no longer reported as an individual programme, but it fits in with our kind of diverse audience plan and the regular reporting across the authority. So if I could have my slide deck up, please. I'm going to run through the slide deck that's Appendix 1. I'll do it as briefly as I can, and then I'm going to turn my camera off. Thank you. Am I able to move these slides on, or shall I just say move on when needed? Yes, thank you. So I'm going to start with the massive impact that COVID has had on volunteering over the last year. As you see here, we've had to stop volunteering, start again, change our processes in line with the tier system, and this has made management of volunteers really difficult. Obviously, it's had an impact on the number of volunteering hours we've had across the authority. We're currently running at about 25% of normal activity in this current year compared to 2019-2020, and the KPI relating to volunteering, KPI 14, has had to be changed to reflect this need to start to rebuild volunteering rather than kind of building on the previous year's financial support from volunteering. Next slide, please. So this is a comparison of the volunteering kind of hours and numbers from 2019-20 and this last year. So we see it's about just over 25% comparatively, and this is because of the start-stop nature and then the limited activities that we've been able to run over the last year. Next slide, please. despite the challenges we've had, we have achieved a lot over the last year. We've improved volunteer communication channels, and this has been really critical during COVID. We've improved our volunteering web pages. We've allowed volunteers to access ELMS training, and we've moved some of our training onto virtual platforms. We've had to move on in terms of moving our inductions online and some of our processes such as expenses. We have been able to develop some new roles, and we have new volunteer roles in the foundation and in Trails. We are inducting our first set of very new Trails volunteers next week. We continue to develop our corporate offer and what we can offer to our kind of business partners. And volunteer representation continues to grow. This is through the voice group, our volunteer surveys, focus groups and questionnaires. Support for the volunteer line managers and leads has been there throughout the COVID pandemic, and this has ensured a kind of really consistent approach through the authority. The priority has really been to keep our volunteers safe, and we have achieved this. And I don't think any of this couldn't have happened without really good cross-team working. So I want to say a big thank you to all of my colleagues who've been involved in this work. And John alluded to it in terms of the amount of risk assessments and focus on health and safety we've had to do over the last year. Okay, so one of the surveys we ran during the lockdown last year was a volunteer feedback survey. This was across the whole authority. This slide here is specifically for the engagement volunteers, but overall, all of the volunteering programmes, 94% of our volunteers said that they enjoyed volunteering, and 90% of volunteers would actually recommend volunteering with us. This is really great, but obviously we want to do better on this. And the survey from last year will act as a baseline survey moving forward. We want to be able to mirror the recommendation score that we have in the staff survey and the volunteer survey, and we'll be running subsequent surveys in September this year across all of the programmes we've got running. Next slide, please. Another focus of our work over the last year has been funding for volunteering. There's been certain really positive movement in this, and this will continue to be an area of development for us. So looking at our corporate funding, looking at how we can work with the foundation to support funding for volunteers, and also project funding for specific projects as well. Next slide, please. So moving on to the kind of key priorities for this financial year, we've done a lot of work on how volunteering will support the diverse audience plan. The volunteering plan will support the diverse audience plan through cultural change, ways of working and projects. And this in turn will also support the work that's happening on the Investors in People project. So we're looking at how we can support our volunteers in welcoming all, change the ways of working to increase diversity and involvement, and then volunteering specifically as part of the projects such as the Generation Green project. Next slide. So the key next steps for this coming year are outlined there. My role's now part of the people management team, so there'll be greater opportunity to support the authority one team approach and to fully integrate volunteers into our place and our work. We continue to support the engagement team, especially the engagement rangers, to support our engagement with visitors, looking at how we can do new ways of volunteering through community volunteering, micro volunteering, family volunteering, really diversifying what we have on offer. Continuing to build on our new roles that we've got running and expanding that into visitor centres, cycle hire and other roles which we'll identify as we move forward. And then to really make sure that all our staff have the knowledge and the ability to involve volunteers in their work if it's appropriate. So that is the end of the slide deck. Thank you. So yeah, the recommendations really are that we continue working and focusing on the elements of the volunteering action plan and the kind of 4 main streams of that. But this becomes business as usual, and we don't necessarily have to report back to the Programmes and Resources Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Again, a lot going on despite COVID. And we know the popularity of the park as a place to volunteer is actually growing. I know from all my contacts that it's actually more and more people not only want to come and enjoy the pub, but want to give something back. James, you've got your hand up, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendation, Chair. I just think this is an incredibly impressive piece of work. This is, in fact, in my experience, one of the most comprehensive approaches to volunteering that I've seen. I think the fact that it's been managed in such a difficult period is testament to how effective that collaboration has been, and the fact that 94% of those volunteering would recommend it to others is the killer fact in my view. So I really don't want to say anything more than it's just an exemplary piece of work and something we should be incredibly proud of. Congratulations.
Andrew?
Thank you. I'll second that, and I echo entirely what James said. Rachel, congratulations. In what must have been an incredibly difficult time for you and all your team. And I noticed that in the new KPI, you talk about rebuilding, and I can quite understand that as well. And yet probably now more than ever, volunteers have never been more important. And I like as well, looking forward, you mentioned, amongst other things, local community volunteers, because we mustn't lose sight of the fact that whilst we have fantastic volunteers, I'm thinking volunteer rangers, most of whom probably come from outside the park, there are people, residents within the park, who are equally proud of where they live and want to put something back. And I've noticed just recently, as an example, the amount of residents getting together to litter pick around our villages. Here in Yorgrave, I noticed Hartington, there's up in the Hope Valley. In Bakewell, residents, I can see them with their pink bags in the evening. These are all volunteering in the national park to keep the national park a beautiful place. And I think we need to, you know this, we need to foster that and support it and embrace it. So like James, super paper, really forward looking, power to your elbow. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. Can I just respond to that? So we're doing some work at the moment to facilitate community action, volunteering action. So we've donated so far, we've got about 10 litter picking kits that have gone out to parishes. We're in the process of developing that and developing a Peak District Proud Ambassador scheme where we can extend that to the public. So yeah, it's really important to kind of facilitate local action as part of this programme. Thank you.
Pete Tapping?
Thank you, Zahid. Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, well done for the past year. It must have been really hard. Just on the developing local volunteers and micro volunteering, I wonder if you could reach out through the Big Park Parishes Forum to get parishes to get volunteers to help in their local area, particularly around the parking issue. We were talking about parking earlier on. Whether there's any scope for training people to volunteer to get some sort of official backing to help visitors with the parking issues and with their local area. Thank you.
So the first step we are taking is around the litter, because it's something we can we have experience of doing ourselves and the risk and everything. So we are starting off with the litter picking. And as I mentioned, we've got the Peak District Ambassador programme that we're working on at the moment. So that'll be identifying where we can support parishes and communities. And we are working with the parishes network to do that. And we'll be looking at how we can signpost what else is going on, what are the opportunities there are for communities to get involved. But it is a work in progress. So we will be looking and talking to parishes about what the needs are and how we can support that.
Thank you very much. Excellent and really nice, high standard you set yourself, Rachel. That's great. And I know that you're already doing this, but also it's picking up on working with other partners and agencies who also use volunteers, particularly when we talk about things like the fires and what's happening. So somewhere like Stanage, I know that they want to come to you and talk about having a more coordinated approach to volunteers around Stanage, because that's another area where we can do some exemplary work. No, excellent work.
Thanks.
Okay, if there are no other questions, could I ask Dem Services then to do a call on the recommendation, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll read out each member's name. If you can let me know if you're voting for, against or abstaining. Mr Beresford.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Professor Haddock-Fraser.
For.
Councillor Heath.
For.
Councillor McCloy.
For.
Councillor McLaren.
For.
Councillor Priestley.
think Councillor Priestley has left. Yeah.
Councillor Tapping,
For.
Councillor Woods, and Mr. Hamid.
4.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much, members. We have one item for information, which is notes of the meeting of the Member Climate Change Task Group, which have been sent out. So I assume everybody's read those. We now need to move very briefly to Part B. Could I have a...
Yeah, I'll move.
Seconder, thank you, Janet. Could we now move to Part B, so give Democratic Services time to switch off the live?
Thank you, Chair. We'll give you a shout in 2 minutes when we've stopped the streaming. Thank you.
Okay,